The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. And welcome to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. And today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back. This is Chapter 11. It's titled Corporate Control of Politics, page 170. During the bruising primary election season of 2008, a right-wing group put together a 90-minute hit job on Hillary Clinton and wanted to run it on TV stations in strategic states. Federal Election Commission ruled that the advertisements for the documentary were actually campaign ads and thus fell under the restrictions on campaign spending of the McCain-Feingold Act and thus stopped them from airing. Corporate contributions to campaigns have been repeatedly banned and in various ways since 1907, when Republican President Teddy Roosevelt pushed through the Tillman Act. Citizens United, the right-wing group, sued to the Supreme Court with right-wing hitman and former Reagan Solicitor General Ted Olson, the man who argued Bush's side of Bush v. Gore, as their lead lawyer. This new case, Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, presented the best opportunity for the Roberts Court to use its 5-vote majority to completely rewrite the face of American politics, rolling us back to the pre-1907 era of the robber barons. And if there was one man to do it, it was John Roberts. Although he was handsome with a nice smile and photogenic young children, Roberts was no friend to average working Americans. If anything, he was the most radical judicial activist appointed to the court in more than a century. He had worked most of his life in the interest of the rich and powerful and was chomping at the bit for a chance to turn more of America over to his friends. As Jeffrey Toobin wrote in The New Yorker, quote, "In every major case since he became the nation's 17th Chief Justice, Roberts has sided with the prosecution over the defendant, the state over the condemned, the executive branch over the legislative, and the corporate defendant over the individual plaintiff. Even more than Scalia, who has embodied judicial conservatism during a generation of service on the Supreme Court, Roberts has served the interests and reflected the values of the contemporary Republican Party." End of quote. And the fastest way the modern Republican Party could recover its power over the next decade was to immediately clear away all impediments to unrestrained corporate participation in electoral politics. If a corporation likes a politician, it can ensure that he is elected every time. If it becomes upset with a politician, it can carpet bomb her district and with a few $1 million worth of ads and politically destroy her. In the Citizens United case, the Roberts Court listened to arguments and took briefs and even discussed it among themselves as if they were going to make a decision. But instead of deciding the case on the relatively narrow grounds on which it had originally been argued, whether a single part of a single piece of legislation, in this case McCain-Feingold, was unconstitutional, the court asked for it to be re-argued in September 2009 and asked that the breadth of the arguments be expanded to re-examine the rationales for Congress to have any power to regulate so-called free speech by corporations. In this, they were going along with a request from Theodore B. Olson, who argued Bush v. Gore and would not just look at this narrow case, but go back nearly 20 years to re-examine and perhaps overturn their own ruling in the Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce case, where the court held that it was constitutional for Congress to pass limits on corporate political activities, as well as its decision in 2003 to uphold McCain-Feingold as constitutional. The setup for this 2010 decision came in June of 2007 in the Federal Election Commission versus Wisconsin Right to Life case, in which the Robert courts ruled that the FCC could not prevent Wisconsin Right to Life from running ads just because it was a corporation. The idea of Congress passing laws that limited corporate free speech was clearly horrifying to both Roberts and Scalia. Scalia went after the 1990 Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce case, in which the then Rehnquist court had ruled that the Michigan Chamber of Commerce was limited in its free speech in a political campaign because it was a corporation. Scalia complained this Austin was the only pre-McConnell case that this court had ever permitted the government to restrict political speech based on the corporate identity of the speaker. Austin upheld state restrictions on corporate independent expenditures, and God forbid the statute had been modeled after the federal statute the BCRA 203 amended. End of quote. The Austin case, Scalia concluded, with four others nodding, was a significant departure from ancient First Amendment principles. In my view, it was wrongly decided. Scalia was quoted at length from opinions in the Grosjean v. American Press 1936 case. In Scalia's words, quote, holding that corporations are guaranteed the freedom of speech and of press, safeguarded by the due process of law clause of the 14th Amendment. He also quoted the 1986 Pacific Gas and Electric Company versus Public Utility Commission of California case. The identity of the speaker is not decisive in determining whether speech is protected. Corporations and other associations, like individuals, contribute to the discussion, debate, and the dissemination of information and ideas that the First Amendment seeks to foster. The bottom line for Scalia was, quote, the principle that such advocacy is at the heart of the First Amendment's protection and is indispensable to decision-making in a democracy is no less true because the speech comes from a corporation rather than an individual. The book, Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, who is coming back shortly from working on a documentary on climate change. He will be back on Monday. This is my last day here in this chair. So if you want to talk with me, give us a call. I want to take as many calls today as possible. There's a lot going on. As you know, slow news week. But the other thing I say over and over and over and over again is that we only lose when we forget what we're fighting for. We have to always remember our goals. This is what we want, a nation that we want to build, the nation that we want to live in, the world that we want to live on. And joining me right now, it's a great honor to have Congressman Ro Khanna from California's 17th District to talk about the people's budget, which I think, as a moral document, is the best vision out there for what we're fighting for. Congressman, thank you for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program.
Alex, thank you for having me on.
So it's just, there's a lot in the people's budget. So I just kind of want to throw it to you and let you tell people about it and, you know, what's the thinking on putting it out and pushing it so hard as an alternative vision?
Well, the people's budget is a bold, progressive vision of what we think our country should be. And at a time where you have Donald Trump proposing a $5 trillion tax cut, there are so many better ways that we could be using the funding. So we have a $2 trillion plan for investment in infrastructure. That includes the traditional infrastructure of building roads and highways that will create jobs, but also expanding broadband to make sure everyone has broadband in this country. You know, I was at talking to a Native American tribe up in northwest Washington, and they were sharing how when the school kids have to take a test, the mayor, the local leader, sends out a notice that no one can use the internet because that's how much bandwidth they have. So making sure everyone in this country has access to broadband. Then talking about health care and Medicare for all and moving towards a single payer health care system, making sure that we have free public college. And on the financial side, having a financial transaction tax to deal with all of this speculation, having stronger antitrust provisions, taxing, making sure companies are paying tax on all their overseas earnings. So it's really a vision for what the economy should be to help working families and to create jobs.
And it's also a document and a vision for an America that is broadly supported by the American people. The proposals like moving to a expanded Medicare for all health care delivery system instead of what we've got right now is incredibly popular, not just with Democrats, but with independents and Republicans. And really, the only thing that's missing is political will on this. And that's why it's so heartening to see the people's budget and the rallying around it as, you know, a vision saying this is what the people want and we can do this if we put our minds to it. Are there any provisions in the people's budget that you particularly would like to highlight?
Well, I appreciate your highlighting the Medicare for All part of it, because you're absolutely right that Republicans and independents support that as well. I think 68% in one of the polls I've seen. And Donald Trump himself was for a single-payer system in 2000. In his book, America We Deserve, The America We Deserve, he says that the Canadian system is far better than ours, and that it's the only system that would provide more coverage and also less cost. And, of course, recently he praised the Australian system. So having a single-payer system is the only way we're going to reduce costs and also make sure everyone has basic health care. I think the affordability and making public college free, this is Bernie Sanders' bill, where any family making under $125,000 would get to go to a public college for free, so we aren't burdening the next generation with extraordinary debt, is an important part of the budget. The other part that's worth highlighting is making sure that we're investing in apprenticeship programs. Not everyone is going to need or wants a four-year college education, but we know that there are apprenticeship programs and skilled trades programs that would lead to good jobs. And one thing that's not part of the people's budget that I'm working with Sherrod Brown is a expansion of the earned income tax credit, and the idea is very simple. You know, Donald Trump is going to have a $5 trillion, as I mentioned, tax break for corporations and the investor class. Now, if you really believe that's the problem in this country, that corporations aren't making enough money, or that somehow the stock market hasn't been doing well enough for those invested in it, then I guess you could go with this plan. But if you believe, as I do and so many other folks do, that the problem in this country is that working families aren't making enough, that the middle class is feeling squeezed, that people are doing the same jobs often that they were doing 10 years ago and aren't having any increase in their wages. If anything, they're having their hours reduced or wages decline, then you would want to make sure that the tax relief was geared at them. And that's why Sherrod Brown and I are going to have a $1 trillion expansion in the earned income tax credit, which would basically give a raise to the bottom 40% of American earners, most working families, of 20%. And so I think it's the people's budget and the progressive wing of the party. It's a values-based issue. We believe that the fundamental challenge is better jobs and higher wages for working families and the middle class.
It's so true that it is a values argument. I mean, I would love to wonk out on the EITC as one of my favorite pieces of policy, and your proposal is phenomenal and is incredible. It would be so well targeted. The money would get right into the economy. There's everything about that. If Republicans were kind of honest with what they say, they should support the EITC as well. They should support yours and Senator Brown's efforts. It's a really obvious one, but the truth is, it's about values, and their values align with the billionaire class. And so their policies definitely show that. For the people's budget, I just want to let people know they can go to cpcbudget.org. They can check it out there, cpcbudget.org. And I think, you know, Tom's audience are the exact people who really want to and can raise up the people's budget, your efforts on the EITC. The last thing I want to ask you about in the people's budget and maybe outside of it as well is the policies to lower prescription drug prices, which, again, massively supported, not at all a partisan issue. Republicans, Democrats, independents, they are all on the same page that drug prices are too high. And the people's budget includes provisions to lower drug prices. I'm hoping that there could be movement on lowering drug prices, even in this climate, because it's gotten so out of control. Do you think I'm rose-colored glasses on that?
Well, you're right. The polling shows there's overwhelming support for allowing for the importation of drugs from Canada. Or, we make these drugs. We allow other countries to buy generic versions, and then we aren't allowed to import them back. Donald Trump, again, ran on this, and then the pharmaceuticals got to him. Early on, Peter Welch was one of the best members of Congress from Vermont, and Elijah Cummings actually went to the White House. And they said, Mr. President, you campaigned on doing something about outrageous drug costs. You campaigned on allowing for the importation of drugs. Why don't you support this effort we have? And if he were true to his campaign promises, and if he were true to what people want, he would do something. So the effort is there in Congress. It's been led for years by people like Peter Welch and Elijah Cummings, and I'm hopeful. It's certainly a part of the people's budget, and I'm hopeful that there will be some progress. Although the president has really backed away, and I'm not saying this in a partisan way, just in an objective way. The populist aspects of how he campaigned on Social Security, on prescription drugs, on infrastructure. So far, he's backed away from that, and that's been disappointing. If I could make one final point, one of the attacks on the people's budget is it going to lead to deficit spending? And I would just say two things. One is Stephanie Kelton's work as an economist is very, very thoughtful about how it's just not true that we're Greece and Japan has 240% debt to GDP ratio in an environment that's non-inflationary, where there's largely price stability. We ought to have a government spending to help with wages and jobs. And I think the Democrats need to really push back on this argument that somehow we're like Greece, where what happened with Greece was a change of currency, not a problem with their debt to a GDP ratio. And then the final point is my hope. Of course, I'm biased. I'm part of the Progressive Caucus, but I really think the Democrats win if we have a bold counter vision and a spine in standing up for that. And I believe that the people's budget really should become the platform of the Democratic Party. And there are a lot of us growing in the Progressive Caucus, but for those listeners who go to the document, like the document, maybe can encourage that this is really the agenda that Democrats should run on.
Congressman Ro Khanna from California's 17th District, thank you so much for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program. And, I want to just reiterate the last thing you said. For anybody who's listening or watching, go to cpcbudget.org, read it. You'll love what you see there, and then call your members of Congress, call the Democrats, and tell them that this should be the vision. This should be the Democratic vision. This is the vision that is going to align the party with where the people are and can carry us forward, not just in defeating Donald Trump's agenda, but also in building the nation that we want to see. Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alec.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I want to take all of your calls, so give us a call. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Give us a call, 202-808-9925. Give us a call. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm going to be taking calls, so I'm going to go to Omar. Omar, you're on the line.
Yes, sir. Alex Larson, thank you so much for taking my call. A great time filling in, and it's very educational. I learned a lot from you. And, I really think I want to get your opinion. We need a march to impeach, just like we did for the Nixon back in the days, really. And you remember when the Tea Party during Obama administration said, we want to take our country back?
Yeah. Omar,
Hello?
did we lose you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Yeah, remember when the Tea Party back in the day said we need to take our country back?
Yes.
Okay, we need to take our country back from these oligarchs and all these autocrats, these billionaires, Wall Street people who basically ripping us off, passing all these lies. This is the equivalent of a genocide, but they're doing it by policies, by passing all these healthcare policy that doesn't benefit the people, only benefit the rich. And I really think we need a march to impeach Donald Trump. It is very important for us because we cannot have the 1% of the war basically making all the money. And just like Elizabeth Warren said, none of these billionaires made it on their own. They got some help along the way, and it was made by our taxpayers and by the government policies that put in place to make sure that they succeed. And for the whole idea for them just to take all their money and then just basically rip us off is unacceptable. And we have to rise up, and we need to basically fight against these oligarchs and all these billionaires and millionaires.
Omar, you're speaking my language. I love it. Every time you call in, I'm like, yes, Omar, sign me up. That's exactly what we need to do. Repeal and replace Donald Trump. That's what we got to do. I think, a march for impeachment is definitely something that could build over time. You're seeing, I think what I'm saying is there's a lot of efforts right now that everyone should get plugged into. And, there's distributed actions and organizations like Indivisible. We had Ben Wickler in here yesterday from MoveOn.org talking about their efforts. They had actions all around the country at Senate offices. And they have a strategy of pushing to get 3 Republican senators to basically say nothing is going to happen in the Senate until a special prosecutor is appointed, especially since that would have to come from the executive. And there is a lot of efforts right now. Me at Social Security Works, in my day job with John Bowser Bauman, we're going around looking for 3 Republicans to say they're going to vote no on a reconciliation bill that includes Medicare and Medicaid. And these are all fights. These are all battles in the overall war, which is the people versus the oligarch. So, Omar, I think you're exactly right that we need the people to stand up, get into the street, take action. And one of those forms is definitely going to be a march for consequences on Donald Trump for the fact that he is running roughshod and attacking the foundations and the fundamentals of our democracy. Omar, thanks so much for your call. And we're going to be taking calls, a lot of calls today. This week, I know sometimes I didn't take enough calls, so I'm going to try to make up for it today by taking a lot of them. So give us a call. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I want to hear from you. Give us a call, 202-808-9925. Going to the phones, I'm going to go to Kyle in Oklahoma. Kyle, you're on the line.
Thank you for taking my call. I think people do not quite understand that our political incompetency has been allowed to take place because the dollar is the currency, the world currency. Oil trades off, everything trades off the dollar. Bloomberg, an article in Bloomberg says that China is busy spending over $1 trillion developing basically an infrastructure that's going to interconnect 4.5 billion people through Africa, Europe. It's going to be highway, rail, communications. And what they're doing is they sat back and watched the European Union try to take the dominant currency over from the dollar. They will do it. They will do it. 4.5 billion people interconnected will run over the United States. They will take it over. Their currency, whatever currency it ends up being, will become the dominant currency. Oil will trade off of it. We will become nobody. And this incompetency that we have been allowed to take place, the debt, everything, the political incompetency will come home to roost. And we need to get our act together, and we need to get it together pretty quick. And they're working on it. And imagine what that many people can do when they decide they want to build a rail system to interconnect or a highway. They don't mess around. They've got the people to do it and the equipment, and it will happen within, I think they said, the article said by the year, maybe within 5 or 10 years, it's going to be well on its way to completion.
Kyle, you know what? I thank you for your call. I appreciate your point. I'm not as worried about the dollar, ending the dollar as the world's reserve currency. It's not maybe not. There's pluses and minuses. China's not looking for the renminbi to be the reserve currency. They love having a low currency so that they can have massive trade surpluses with around the world. I mean, it's like they buy. I'm not as worried about that. The kernel of what you're talking about, though, that I think is extremely important to note is that the Chinese government is making massive public investments in infrastructure because they know that is how you invest in your own country and your own people. And yes, they're going to be able to do a lot of things. There's a lot of people. They have a lot of citizens there. We have a lot of people here, too, in America. We are a great nation. We are a large nation. We have 2 oceans, and America has a long history of innovation, of doing great things when we put our minds to it, when we're not dancing to the tune of Wall Street, who are looking at extracting wealth. They don't want to create anything. They just want to take the things that are there and suck money out of them. We could have massive public investment as well. We need to have massive public investment. I think the actuaries or engineers, say $3.6 trillion in infrastructure spending. I bet you that's low. Let's do a $4 trillion infrastructure spending. Let's build high-speed rail. Let's actually focus more on America, not in a competitive way, although we're competing, but because it will be awesome in America to have high-speed rail all across the country. That's what we can do when we build the political will to do it.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Taking more of your calls at 202-808-9925 right after this.
It's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. This is toward the very end, and it's a chapter titled Transforming Culture Through Politics. Many think it's just to fund tax cuts and subsidies for the rich, that the multimillionaire CEOs who've taken over almost all senior posts in government are just pigs at the trough. And this is a spectacular but ordinary form of self-serving corruption. It all seems so plausible, and there's even a grain of truth to it. But juicy deals for right-wing government insiders and their friends are just a byproduct of the real and deeper war against democracy. The neoconservatives are perfectly happy for us to think that they're just opportunists skirting the edges of legality and morality. But this is far more dangerous than simple government corruption. Indeed, the neoconservatives claim to be anti-government. As a leading spokesman for the neocon agenda, Grover Norquist told National Public Radio's Mara Liasson, a May 25th, 2001 Morning Edition interview, quote, "I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub," end quote. Without a larger view, the issues of domestic spending, oil, neoconservative power plays in both major parties, the loss of liberties, anti-government rhetoric, and war in the Middle East all seem like separate and unconnected events. They're not. The new conservatives who've seized the Republican Party and who, through the Democratic Leadership Council, are nipping at the heels of the Democratic Party are not our parents' conservatives. Historic conservatives like Barry Goldwater, Harry Truman, and Dwight Eisenhower would be appalled, although their philosophical roots go back to Alexander Hamilton, who openly argued during the Constitutional Convention that royalty was the best form of government. The neocons have always been kept to the fringe. Indeed, the Reagan-Bush revolution flew in the face of traditional conservative ideals. As John Stockwell notes in his book, The Praetorian Guard, the U.S. Role in the New World Order, Reagan and Bush were proud of their contempt for their concerns of environmentalists, with Reagan once saying, "If you've seen one redwood, you've seen them all." Their Department of the Interior under James Watt sold off minerals and forests to campaign contributors at fire sale prices, and their EPA in many cases moved from prosecuting corporate polluters to legitimizing and protecting them under the guise of regulation. Although James Madison wrote in 1792 that an important role of government was to promote a strong middle class, quote, "by the silent operation of the laws, which, without violating the rights of property, reduce extreme wealth toward a state of mediocrity and raise extreme indigence toward a state of comfort," end of quote from James Madison. That was not a sentiment shared by those in the Reagan-Bush revolution. Instead, Reagan raised taxes on the middle class and working people while cutting taxes by more than 60% for the most wealthy in America. At the same time, he bragged that he'd eliminated more than 1,000 programs for poor people, and even proposed that poor school children should be content with ketchup as their daily vegetable. At the same time, the Reagan-Bush administration and later the George W. Bush administration worked hard to roll back the very individual liberties that America's founders had fought and died for. Dwight Eisenhower left office warning Americans about the dangers of the concentration of power resulting from corporations getting into bed with the military. But the Reagan-Bush and W. Bush administrations openly embraced these corporate powers, inviting them into the halls of governance and hungrily sucking at the teat of their campaign contributions. In the past, those promoting what is now called the New Conservative Agenda went by different names. The founders of America knew that for 6,000 years, civilized human beings had been ruled by one of three groups: kings, theocrats, or feudal lords. Kings held power by virtue of the threat of violence and continual warfare. Theocrats and popes held power by the people's fear of a god or gods, and feudal lords by wealth and the power that comes from throwing average people into poverty. The new idea of our founders in 1776 was to throw off all three of these historic tyrannies and replace them with a fourth way: the people being ruled by themselves, a government that derived its legitimacy and continuing existence solely from the approval of its citizens. Government of, by, and for we the people. They called it a constitutional Republican democracy. What we are seeing now in the conservative agenda is nothing less than an attempt to overthrow Republican democracy and replace it with a worldwide feudal state. The last time this happened, the feudalists took over a monarchy in North America. In December 1600, Queen Elizabeth I chartered the East India Company, ultimately leading to a corporate takeover of the Americas for the colonists that ended with the Boston Tea Party and 3 years later, the American Revolution. The corporate state partnership of the East India Company and the UK went on to conquer India, but eventually disintegrated as the British Empire faded and the British government, along with most of Western Europe, embraced somewhat more Jeffersonian forms of democracy. Conservatism raised its head again in the 20th century, revived by Franco, Hitler, and Mussolini. The Italian dictator even used the word corporatism to describe it and then later renamed it as fascism, a word defined by the American Heritage Dictionary as, quote, a system of government that exercises a dictatorship of the extreme right, typically through the merging of state and business leadership together with belligerent nationalism. The book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight.
Okay, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at HartmannReport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin filling in for Tom. Going to go right to the phones here. Drew in Kansas, you're on the line.
Hey, Alex. Actually, what I'm about to talk about is for Kimon as well to hear, and Haley Barber. Alec always has stuff ready to go in the hopper for Congress. What I'm suggesting is a piece of legislation that we may need to put out 20 to 30 years from now, but it's still extremely important, and no one's considered this. When the singularity happens and robots actually become self-aware, we need to start giving them rights, civil rights, to make sure they're not taken advantage of by sociopathic corporations, because I think they'll be our biggest tool in possibly fighting conservatives as well. So I think we need to have this legislation primed and ready to give them rights. You see where I'm coming from, right?
Yeah, I don't look that far into the future to self-aware, sentient robots.
Alternative humans.
So, I mean, I think we should always be prepared for what's coming in the future. I also think that we're barely prepared for just the automation that we're seeing right now, and protecting labor and wages, and understanding that automation and robots are not a necessarily bad thing in terms of taking jobs. They are just can transform an economy, and as long as all the gains don't go to the top, it is not it's not something that is necessarily bad for the economy. Robots are not necessarily, by nature, going to take all of our jobs. That's just not what's going to happen. And, my favorite economist, Dean Baker, has written extensively on this about not fearing the robots taking our jobs future. And we just need policies put in place. Who's stealing our jobs? Let me put it, the robots aren't going to steal our jobs. The billionaires on Wall Street are stealing our jobs. And we just need policies in place to deal with that. Thank you so much, Drew, for your call. And I'm going to go to Mitch in Washington State. Mitch, you're on the line.
Hi. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm trying to bring up the subject that your program today has touched upon twice, the readings about that are connected with the need to change our ecological policies.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I also read in Tom's book, The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, a very poignant point, and that was that he says it takes oil to make green products. So we have basically are using our bank account, our stored oil or ancient sunlight to create these products. And I think that message isn't coming through enough, because even the speaker yesterday about the convention in Washington, that was not mentioned. And I think we have to bring that out more.
Bring out more the changing away from an oil-based economy totally. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we're not aware that we're going to need to use oil to make these products.
Right, as long as we have an oil-based economy that it's underlying all of the products and basically everything that we do. It's a great point. I do think that, we need to do the best that we can. So there is, the guest yesterday was talking about the Green Festival, was saying that one way of cutting down on emissions is moving to a plant-based diet. And, I think that's good. It also has health benefits. But I also don't think we need to go only all the way there, right? If people take a step in the right direction, that's a good thing. And I would love to see the corporate death penalty to any oil company that has a major ecological disaster, instead of them not having to pay anything for that, I would like them to have to pay everything for that so that we don't, as taxpayers, subsidize big oil, and which is the only way that it's actually profitable is with our tax dollars. And if we subsidized alternative energy in even a similar level, it would be, we're talking about an entirely different world. But I also support efforts that walk in that direction. And I don't think you're saying you don't support efforts that walk in that direction. Your just statement made me think about, there are some great companies who are working within the current energy grid and the current energy system to just change slightly. So they're not sourcing dirty energy. So nothing from coal plants, nothing from nuclear plants, and everything from renewables. And there are companies that are showing that that's a great way, not only of taking a step in the right direction, but making money as well, and that it's a very viable business to walk in that direction and to move away from an oil-based economy. Just kind of hoping to resonate with the point you made. Although it seems like, we can never do that because the oil is too fundamental to our economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've done it before. Current extractive processes for the oil that we're using, we've had entire economies based on other oil. The whale oil at a point was like driving the consumption and was a massive part of the economy. And it was not really, it was difficult to see how you could move away from that and da-da-da-da-da. And then all of a sudden we have a technology change. And we do. The economy just moves. So we can spur that on through public investment, to be super clear, and we should. And, I think maybe battery technology is going to be the one that really takes us and just transforms our economy kind of in one, which is why oil companies are pretty afraid of that, because very efficient batteries would allow us to collect the renewable sources and hold that energy and not lose it. And so there's a lot of things. And if we can just build the political will to look to the future and invest in a green economy and green energy, a system underlying, we will just, it won't even be that traumatic moving over to something, and people will make a lot of money. The economy will actually benefit from this. The extractive industry economy is extremely destructive. So it's not really creating, it's destroying. I'm going to take another. So Mitch, thank you so much for your call. I'm going to go to Bruce in Wyoming. No, I'm sorry, Bruce in West Virginia.
Hi, Alex.
Hey, Bruce. Thanks for calling.
Just a quick comment about a couple of things. Over the course of the last couple of years, I've read a couple of very interesting books on Social Security, and the one I read last year, Expand Social Security Now.
Yeah, Stephen Hill.
So many people think that Social Security is going broke and it's crooked and it's a Ponzi system, but the number one thing that I used to think about for years and years and years is the payroll tax. If I have to pay 100% of the payroll tax on my gross earnings, why can't somebody who's making $200,000 or $2 million or $20 million pay the same 6.2% that I pay into it? And if a person wants to try to strengthen Social Security, that's one of the easiest no-brainers of all.
Yep.
Is remove that arbitrary limit on the payroll tax.
Yep. I'll go one better, though, Bruce, and hopefully you've read our book, Social Security Works, the book.
I did. I read that 1 year before last.
Perfect. And Stephen Hill's book is fantastic as well. And we have a new book. You can send me an email from my website, socialsecurityworks.org, and I'll send you our new book as soon as it comes out, it's going to be awesome. It's on what the original vision of Social Security was, this expansive vision that the actual people who created it, Francis Perkins, Eleanor Roosevelt, FDR, and the collection of people, what they actually were working to create, an ever-expanding system.
Folks either purchasing both of these books or get them from your local library or from a friend or wherever you can get them. They're easily readable, charts, graphs, and they're not a heavy lift, but they really open up, not just open up your eyes, but open up the possibility for the real strengths and positives that Social Security has pretty much on every corner you think about it.
Bruce, me and you, simpatico here. I love what you're saying. I'll put out there, send me an email. Go to our website, socialsecurityworks.org. Anyone who's listening, you can find a link to our book there where you can buy it. If that's a trouble for you, just send me an email. I got lots of copies myself, too. So, Bruce, thank you for that. And have you been following some of the bills that, like Bernie Sanders' bill was the first one to do it? There's going to be a new bill coming out soon as well. We're always working on ones. Did you see in Bernie Sanders' bill, we not only scrap the cap in that one, and there's a donut hole, so it's only on incomes above 250 at first, and then that closes so that over time the cap is eliminated totally. But the exciting part there, for wonks like me and you who like this policy, is it also covers unearned income, and that is a really phenomenal policy that Bernie Sanders introduced into the thought here, or the discussion on Social Security, is that for the vast majority of people, I pay in on all of my income, right? It's 6.2% on all of my income. My income is all wages, but I pay in on all of that. But billionaire class folks, plutocrats, they have teams of lawyers and accountants and bankers who set up their system to get around any of this. So they have a lot of unearned income. And so I think I'd encourage you to take a look at that bill, and what we say is not just scrap the cap, but on all of a person's income, so that billionaires and millionaires pay the same rate as the rest of us on all of our income.
Exactly true. There is so much misconception about Social Security. It's incredible. I've had the opportunity over the last couple of years to talk to my Republican representatives, staff members, and every time they say, well, it's a Ponzi scheme, or, well, it's not fair on this regard, or it's unfair to this group of people. You can basically refute and counteract their inaccurate claims left and right. And we just got to stay alert, because they're coming after it.
They
Whether
are.
It's this year, next year, they're coming after it.
Because that's where the money's at. That's where the money's at. That's what Ben Bernanke said, quoting a bank robber, but talking about our money. Bruce, please do go to socialsecurityworks.org, and you can find my emails right on there. You just click on the About and send me an email, because I want to send you. Did you read our republishing of Agrarian Justice by Thomas Paine?
No.
All right, good, because I'm going to send you that one, because we republished Thomas Paine, who gave the first kind of conception of a social insurance program, a pension, an old age and disability pension, along with a cash transfer at the age of majority, which was 21 then. And I'm going to paraphrase, but because a person should start out their lives with an asset and not a debt. I mean, think about that compared to right now when students come out of college with this massive debt. So he was way ahead of his time, and we haven't even gotten there on the starting with an asset. But his conception of the social insurance program was actually funded with an estate tax. And that is a policy that I am a huge proponent of. And I'd love to send you that book so that you could take a look at it. And it's just so fair to actually have an estate tax. I would have a very robust estate tax, because this would be increasing inequality, wealth and income inequality, after a person has died. So it's their estate. The person's not even getting taxed. An estate is only possible when you have a society. we, the people, together create a structure of laws and rules that allow there to be an estate. And because of that, an estate tax is really the fairest tax you can levy. And you can have that estate tax go into Social Security, which you can massively expand, which again reverses income and wealth inequality. So, Bruce, I was going to try to take as many calls as possible in this segment, and then you knew that I would just want to talk about Social Security with you. So I thank you for doing that. I got only 45 seconds or so here. Do you have any other thoughts on Social Security?
Only that it is such a strong program, and if everybody were able to read these couple of books, talk about it, talk to your representative, even if it's a Republican one, keep it in the forefront. Don't just think if you don't talk about it, you'll be safe, because I really think over the course of this next administration, and I hope not beyond, they're going to come after it, because they want that $2.5 or $3 trillion that is currently in the Social Security coffers, if you will. Wall Street wants that money, and the more they can get out of it is the less you'll have.
Bruce, thank you so much for your call. Couldn't agree more. We're going to be taking more of your calls coming up, so give us a call, 202-808-9925. I want to hear from you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Taking more of your calls at 202-808-9925 right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and I'm going to go right to the phones. And for y'all's sake, I'm going to go a little far afield here, and I'm going to take Joe in California, who wants to talk about Medicare.
I'm sorry. Thanks for taking my call. I just got lucky. I got in. Really like you being there for Tom. I was going to mention a couple of things, but first of all, have you heard anything about Hanford? I'll take that later. My thing is Medicare pays for long-term, Medicaid pays for the long-term care of so many people, and I just wanted to try to explain this because I know this is an issue for you, but God forbid, let's say I got hit by a bus. Let's just pretend I got hit by a bus, and I'm insured and I'm employed, and the injuries are devastating. 5 years after the lawsuits are settled and I'm at home, I can't work. I just had been so injured in this accident, and everybody's gotten paid. The lawyers have gotten paid. The healthcare industry's been taken care of. I have a little bit of my own settlement, but you know what? I can't afford these premiums. I've become now a dependent on the state. The state covers me. They pay for all of my long-term care because I can't. I'm destitute. It wasn't, a fault, and I'm young, 40 years old, or what have you. This has been going on for centuries. We have been doing this because I have first-hand experience. I mean, I've been a paramedic for 30 years. People get run over every day. Some of them never return to work, and some of them don't survive. Mm-hmm. So it sounds really disingenuous to me to be telling people, oh, we got to have medical insurance, when I'm, as a taxpayer, paying for everybody anyway. So are you. I think the other side of this coin is, and I posted this on Facebook, is that, Thomas Paine quote was really good. I love that because I made my daughter read that. She's in 8th grade. She doesn't understand who Thomas Paine is, but I do, and I love his book. Pay for public health by convincing corporate America that it's in their best interest. Get them out of employer-based health care plans. They're no longer going to be responsible for that. There's no more workers' comp for businesses now. We have public health. We don't need workers' comp, and we don't need trial lawyers to litigate when people get injured. I think if we can convince corporate America, since we seem to have a corporate mindset in this country, that it is in their best interest to alleviate, as we talk about 6.2 and they're matching, so it's 12.5, and we'll bump that up to just make it, the fight for 15? I'm going to fight for 15% payroll deduction and cover everybody. And when you think about it and you do the numbers, it becomes we get the best health care on the planet everybody else is envious, and we can give our employees, our people at work, a pay raise because we don't have health care obligations.
Joe,
thank you for taking my call.
That's so many great points in there. I want to extend one of them on long-term care because it's so important right now because they're coming after Medicaid with Trump Care. Medicaid is the single largest provider of long-term care in this country, and for the vast majority of people, it is the only provider, and not only for 24-hour care after an accident, and it is there too, but also for nursing homes and long-term care, nursing home and in-home care for people when they become very old. They're dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's, and we're going to be dealing with more and more and more of that. The average cost, $93,000 a year. Medicaid is what pays for long-term care, and that's what they're coming after. That's why we have to stop them, and not only stop them, but as you say, Joe, expand Medicaid and Medicare into one national health care system where health care is a right for all of us. Thanks for your call, Joe. We're taking more calls right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin filling in for Tom, and I only got 2 minutes in this segment, so I want to go right to the phones here. Janice in New Jersey, you're on the line, and we only have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll talk fast. Hi, Alex.
Hi.
I've been trying to get supplemental insurance because I'm retired, and I'm having trouble because I have a mental illness, and they want to charge me a lot of money because of that, and I just wanted to let you know about that. Thanks.
Janice, thank you so much. That was a very quick point, and thank you for it. The idea that, again, all of this goes into how wrong our healthcare system is. It's annoying to me that I feel, I don't know if you hung up or not, but sounded like you were on Medicare and then supplemented, you wanted supplemental insurance to that. And there shouldn't be a need for supplemental insurance. We should be expanding traditional Medicare so that it covers everything, including mental health. And we definitely shouldn't allow costs to rise because of, this bogus concept created by the insurance industry, which is just for their profits of a pre-existing condition. All of that is, I had Michael Lighty on earlier in this week, and it's all part of this discussion of moving the entire system away from a healthcare industry where all of our humanity are the fact that we can become, we get hurt, we get sick, we need to take care of ourselves. All of these things are looked at as a way to profit by companies. That's what we are in right now. Our sickness, anytime sickness is looked at as a way to profit, and instead we need to move to a holistic system of healthcare where our wellness is the goal. Instead of profits, wellness. And that's going to take all of us working together to build that system, but we can do it.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. It's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. In the weeks after 9/11, Rodale Press reached out to a bunch of folks, me, the Dalai Lama, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Rabbi David Wolpe, Thich Nhat Hanh, Chuck Colson, Neil Donald Walsh, and asked for thoughts about a spiritual response to the attack on America. The result was a book, From the Ashes. And this is from the chapter that I wrote, The Goddess of Democracy, a Sacred Archetype to Heal the World. People argue that the terrorist attacks against the United States reflect a war between one religion and another, or between the poor and rich of the world. While there may be an element of truth to each, I'd suggest that the real war here is between the 11th century and the 21st century. And while our leaders, and until our leaders figure that out, we may miss some great opportunities. Back in the Dark and Middle Ages, the Catholic Church ruled Europe. Women were often forbidden to go out in public unless properly covered, and were explicitly the property of men. Justice was swift and severe, ranging from disfigurement to torture to death in horrific ways, and most often meted out with the approval or supervision of clerics. The power behind the power of all the royal families of Europe was the Pope. On November 27th, 1095, Pope Urban gave one of history's most famous speeches to the Council of Clermont in France, calling for a holy war against Islam to unite factious Europe. Dr. E.L. Skip Knox of Boise State University in Idaho summarized the Pope's speech. The noble race of Franks must come to the aid of their fellow Christians in the East. The infidel Turks are advancing into the heart of Eastern Christendom. Christians are being oppressed and attacked. Churches and holy places are being defiled. Jerusalem is groaning under the Saracen yoke. The Holy Sepulchre is in Muslim hands and has been turned into a mosque. The Franks must stop their internal wars and squabbles. Let them go instead against the infidel and fight a righteous war. God himself will lead them, for they will be doing his work. There will be absolution and remission of sins for all who die in the service of Christ. Here they are poor and miserable sinners. There they will be rich and happy. Let none hesitate. They must march next summer. God wills it. Thus began a war between two different medieval cultures, 11th century Catholic and 11th century Muslim. Over the next few centuries, the Catholics, with their battle cry of Deus Vult, God wills it, were often victorious against the Muslims, whose only crime defined by the Pope was that they were living in the Holy Land of the Catholic Church. Medieval historian Raymond of Aguilles wrote the following eyewitness account of the attack and seizure of Jerusalem in 1099 by the triumphant Christian Crusaders. Quote, some of our men cut off the heads of their enemies. Others shot them with arrows so they fell from the towers. Others tortured them longer by casting them into the flames. Piles of heads, hand, and feet were to be seen in the streets of the city. It was necessary to pick one's way over the bodies of men and horses. But these were small matters compared to what happened at the Temple of Solomon, a place where religious services were ordinarily chanted. What happened there? If I tell the truth, it will exceed your powers of belief. So let it suffice to say, this much at least, that in the temple and portico of Solomon, men rode in blood up to their knees and bridle reins. End of quote. In the 900 or so years since the early Crusades, both Christianity and Islam have undergone profound changes. The Protestant Reformation shook Christianity to its core, and the Renaissance in Europe wrought huge transformations in both Christianity and Judaism. Perhaps the most critical change came about in the 18th century when Jefferson, Madison, Franklin, and others synthesized the highest ideals of Greek, Roman, and Iroquois thought and culture to create the United States of America. In doing that, they ignited the flame of liberty, bringing into the world an archetype that to this day inspires hope worldwide. As America grew and our ideas of Republican democracy spread around the world, further transformations of the world took place. Another turning point was when modern science challenged the medieval worldview of the church in the Scopes monkey trial of 1925. Although Clarence Darrow lost that case, its widespread publicity began a dramatic and lasting process of change across the world. The American dream is a powerful and pervasive force in the world, even if the sometimes imperialistic behavior of our transnational corporations is often at odds with our own ideals. That dream has wafted over the entire world and is still so powerful that people are willing to die for it. In China, the Tiananmen Square protesters marched to their doom in 1989, carrying a 37-foot-tall papier-mâché replica of the Statue of Liberty, which they had renamed the Goddess of Democracy. Of course, there are still pockets of medieval perspective in the Christian world. The post-disaster comments of Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, who said they had just witnessed the wrath of their God, who had lifted the veil and allowed the terrorists to act because of their God's anger over homosexuals, liberals, and the ACLU, reveals that such a worldview is still alive and well in a small fringe of Christianity. Some Christians are still today willing to commit terrorist acts of murder or mass murder. Timothy McVeigh and those who murdered numerous abortion providers all claimed their acts are grounded in Christianity and biblical teachings. And just as 21st century Christianity still has its own pockets of medieval worldview, so does 21st century Islam. And then it gets into, how these reformations happen and, what we hope to see in among those right-wing crazies in Islam. The book is From the Ashes, A Spiritual Response to the Attack on America.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, who is coming back. So don't worry, he'll be back on Monday. This is the last day you're stuck with me. But I'm going to take full advantage of it by taking as many of your calls as possible at 202-808-9925. It's my distinct pleasure to be joined in studio by my business partner, Kimon Freeman, who is going to be taking your calls with me. Kimon, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
So let's go right to the lines here. We've been talking about a lot of stuff. So we've got a variety of issues. And Darren in California, you're on the line.
Yeah, Alex. Hey, I really enjoyed the couple of Bruce and the other caller. It's nice to see that people have some intelligence still. What I want to talk about is very disturbing. I was listening to Stephanie Miller, and she said that Trump he threatened Comey that if he came out to push some videos that he just said he better not come out with some videos or I think he was talking about audio tapes. But he seems to be, he's not even hiding what he's doing. He fired the FBI because he wanted to stop the investigation. I think he's grabbing power. Is our only hope McMaster and Mad Dog?
No, I don't think that's our only hope. I think our only hope is the people, and that we're going to rise up and stop Donald Trump, who is no master, he's in no way some political mastermind or anything. And he is subject to the law. He is not above the law. I want to go through a little bit of what Darren was talking about because it allows me to make fun of Donald a little bit too.
I will call him a ringmaster, though. I'll give him that.
Yeah, he's what he's always been. He's just is impulsive and he thinks he's going to get away with everything. But
the system created Donald Trump and made it, and the Republican Party laid a fertile ground for Trump to rise up. And this is the fruits of their labor. And the fact that we're having this type of uproar over the firing of the FBI director. I wish we had the same response when the FBI said 10 years ago that all law enforcement in this country has been infiltrated by white supremacists, also known as ghost skins. There wasn't a peep of uproar about that, because you understand what I just said? All law enforcement, but we have the ringmaster running a circus right now, and he's turned American politics into a reality TV show.
Yeah, and it's not that good, is what I'm saying. Like, just
the ratings are.
The ratings are good because people like they can't turn away from a car wreck. I mean, like, so he fired Comey, and then he sent his people out to say it was about Hillary Clinton's emails. And, I was like, and many people were like, well, it clearly wasn't about Hillary Clinton's emails. It's about the ongoing investigation. And I was arguing with a smart conservative friend of mine on Facebook yesterday and today, and he's like, and many people have said this, but you can't know what's in Donald Trump's mind when he made that decision. There's no way you can know what is in Donald Trump's mind. What information do you have that you're saying that they're lying, that what they're saying isn't true? And I'm like, well, first of all, it's obvious. And so a reasonable person would not think that it is about her emails, because he praised Comey about her emails previously, right? And why now and all of that. And then there was able to be a discussion. And then Donald Trump went on television and said, I was thinking about the investigation and Russia when I decided to fire him. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, there you go. We now know exactly what his state of mind is. And what that means is that is more than enough for me to say that's obstruction of justice. That
Absolutely.
Looks exactly like obstruction of justice to me, and that is an impeachable offense. At the very least, we need an independent investigation into everything.
Well, good luck with the independent, but my grandmother used to say, 2 + 2 = 4 all the way around the world. The only thing that changes is the language describing. The math doesn't change. The fact is he stopped an investigation. That's it. I mean, there's no other way around it. That's the math. That's the facts. And so to have a red herring issue talking about we don't know what's inside his mind. I don't care to know what's inside his mind. We know what he did.
We also know what's inside his mind. He's like one of the few people who you actually could say we know what's inside of his mind, because it's called Twitter.
yeah.
Right? I mean, he live tweets his impulsive behavior.
I would love to see Obama have done some of this stuff to see what the turmoil would have been.
One
I would have loved
of
to
the
see
tiny things that he has done. And do you remember when the scandal was when he had the beer? Give me the facts on that one so I can remember.
When he bought the police a beer?
Yeah, and I don't remember the names and everything, but do you remember that? That was a scandal.
That was a scandal? I thought that was him, appeasing the FOP. Because he said the cops acted stupidly, so he was forced to buy the guy a beer and invite him to the White House.
He rightly said that the cops acted stupidly when they did what they do.
That was his blackest moments in his entire administration. I mean, he said that, and then he walked away from the podium like George Jefferson. I mean, like that was my proudest moment of Barack Obama.
And that was a quote unquote scandal. And
that was a scandal.
Now, I mean, Donald Trump just can't help himself. That's why so Darren, I hear what you're saying, and the threat that he made against Comey on Twitter was he said, you better hope I don't have tapes of our discussion before you go leaking anything to the press, which is obviously intimidation, right? I mean, and that is very worrying. But Darren, I think my confidence comes in from the fact that the people are outraged and paying attention right now. So yes, there wasn't a peep at when there should have been, and there's often not a peep made when there should be. But right now, people are making
I'm glad to hear that, because unfortunately, Trump is the president that middle America deserves, because they have for far too long turned a blind eye to a lot of corruption, a lot of injustices when it was affecting other people, and now they are feeling some of the oppression that's been distributed. As Martin Luther King said, we need to redistribute the pain. And so Trump is, for better or for worse, he's the guy behind the curtain in the Wizard of Oz, and he's been exposed. The emperor has no clothes. And now we get the opportunity to re-examine capitalism and the system in America as it's been doing business, because we should have had this type of uproar off Citizens United. We should have had this type of uproar eons ago on a number of issues. But here we are, and hopefully we be the better of it.
And the only thing we can control is what we do. Mm-hmm. So the hopeful is that, we stay engaged, and I pledge that. Mm-hmm. And
out of chaos comes order.
And or justice is what I'm more interested in.
Justice would be even better.
I'm more interested in justice. And I think, I understand where Darren is coming from. I understand, and I'm not saying, Darren, I understand broadly people who are scared right now or feeling despair over this. And because
don't be scared, don't be sad, don't be depressed, don't be discouraged. Be mad. Like in the movie the Network, I'm mad as hell, I'm not taking it anymore. Go to your windows, roll up your windows and scream out to your neighbors, I'm mad as hell and I'm not taking it anymore. That's the type of vibe we need.
And then call your members of Congress.
Do something.
Call your senators.
Do something.
Exactly. The tagline of We Act Radio. Steve in Washington State, you're on the line.
How you doing today?
Good. Thanks for calling, Steve.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear us? Steve, we can hear you. I don't know if you can hear us. Can you hear us? Nope.
Hello?
Sorry, Steve, you can't hear us, so we're going to go to...
Sorry, Steve.
Robert in California. Robert, you're on the line.
Yeah. Hi, Alex?
Hi. You're on the line with Kimon and Alex.
Yeah, well, guess what? I was thinking about, the streaming problems, right? It's greed and, the fact that most men think women are inferior. And then also the religious thing where people are believing in invisible beings floating in the sky. Now, to be deluded to the point of thinking that women are inferior and that they're invisible beings, you can also be deluded into believing that Trump's okay. There's nothing wrong with him. So this is the problem. So how do we convince these Trump voters that they're wrong? Well, you can't. Just like, guys are talking about that, it's like a cult. So what's the next step? The next step is everybody has to realize that these people are not normal. I mean, it's a sad thing, but there's a lot of people in America there.
Robert, I take your point, and, I don't think we need to write off anybody. At the same time, I'm not interested at all in reaching out to a white nationalist, right? I'm not interested in debating the merits of a white nationalist's point of view, and I don't think that we need to at all reach out to people who aren't interested in respecting the humanity of everybody, and the policies that we pursue that are focused on working families. Those are going to reach everybody that we want. And so what I'm saying is we don't think about, how are we going to reach out to the Trump voters? We think about how are we going to reach out to the working families in this country? How are we going to make an economy that works for the people?
The fact is that if this was a white country, we would have a lot more equality. We would have a universal health care system already. We wouldn't have a prison industrial complex. We wouldn't have a number of things. But because this is a multicultural society, there are racist roots that don't want to share those things. We don't want those people to have what we have. And that's the elephant in the room, and it needs to be addressed, because the fact of the matter is this is not a democracy, as former President Jimmy Carter said on this show, I believe.
Come on, great point, and thank you for your call. We're going to take a break and be taking more of your calls at 202-808-9925. Kimon is staying with us the entire hour, so give us a call, 202-808-9925. We're going to have a lot of discussion. It's Free-for-All Friday, so Jeff, give us a call, and we can talk about whatever you want. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Taking more of your calls on this free-for-all Friday with Kimon and I at 202-808-9925. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom, and in studio with me is my business partner at weactradio.com, Kimon Freeman, and we're going to take Scott in Maine. Scott, you're on the line.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Good.
Hey, I got two things. I know you guys are, limited on phone calls, so I'll try to be quick.
We're not that limited on phone calls, Scott. We're taking calls today.
Well, time-wise.
Yes.
With Obamacare, which was originally Romney Care, whatever you want to call it, that would have been a successful program. The problem was that Obama gave it to the insurance companies to implement, and the insurance companies do exactly what insurance companies do. They raise rates. When they had to start paying for people that were sick, all of a sudden they weren't making $50 million a year. They're only making 30, so they raised the rates, and they're getting ready to do it again down in Maryland, Connecticut. I mean, it's just astronomical rates. But it would have been a good program if he would have kept it as a government program, but he gave it to the insurance companies. The second thing, I asked your partner there, Trump asked the Hispanics and the blacks, what do you have to lose by voting for me? Well, I'm pretty sure you know now what you got to lose. He's showing it every day, and we got 3 more years unless something happens to this dude. So I don't know, man. I voted for Obama, but I voted for the black part of Obama. The white part of Obama took over and got right back in bed with the banks, and he screwed us, man, big time with the NDAA of 2012. I mean, he did more damage than any 7 presidents put together as far as our individual rights are concerned. I mean, it's a messed up deal. But I don't know. I ain't got an answer for it, but we ought to be pushing single payer, and I don't hear not one Democrat out there saying single payer. I hear Nancy Pelosi saying no.
Well, Scott, let me try to make you happy. For the first time ever, John Conyers' H.R. 676 in the House has the majority of the Democratic caucus on it. Nancy Pelosi did say some things, but the majority of the Democratic caucus is on Conyers' H.R. 676. Bernie Sanders is going to be releasing a Medicare for All bill in the Senate. There is a lot of movement in that direction, Scott, and we need to keep it up. What we need to do is remove the insurance industry completely and build an entirely different healthcare system, one based on justice and wellness, not based on profits. We only got a couple seconds here, Kimon, but I
wish I could buy Scott in Maine a beer, but Scott, I want you to Google right now, Asheru, A-S-H-E-R-U, Asheru, and Wayna. We had actually had a watch party at the Trump Hotel during the debates, and what is ensued that night, these fabulous artists created a song called What Do We Have to Lose? So look that up. You'll love that music. We play it all the time on We Act Radio, and you're absolutely right. Your analysis is absolutely right, and we look forward to raising the fight for single payer in the United States.
Kimon Freeman, I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Thom Hartmann, and we're taking more of your calls, 202-808-9925. We'll be right back with more of your calls. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin with Kimon Freeman in studio. We're taking your calls. Going to go right to the top of the list here. David in California, you're on the line.
How are you doing?
Good.
Hey, got a question.
We're mad as hell.
I got a question. Wondering what I feel is the constitutional crisis behind all of this is, I think it's just a matter of time before all the Russia stuff comes out, and hopefully Trump will be gone. But what I think is the real crisis is because of the effect of the hacking and the changing of voting. Republicans are the presidency is Republican, and it shouldn't be. And if it's found out, or once it's found out that was an effect, and it affected the voting, and Republicans should never have been in there, how in the world can that be turned back?
Well, I think, David, it's a good question. I think the answer is you can't turn back. And I think Cher said that, or she was wanting to, because we can't turn back. But also, what we can do is move forward, and we can get rid of and dismantle all of the voter suppression efforts that are underway. And, you know, the president just tried to initiate a whole new commission, something, some cabal led by a just overt nativist, and it's aimed only at suppressing the vote. This is, you know, that I think is the scandal of this last election, is that there were millions of people whose votes were suppressed.
Purged from the rolls. And
voter ID laws and all of the things that they put in place.
Exactly. And that has not reached the level of the crisis that this Russian issue has. I don't think that Russia is the biggest concern for Americans' day-to-day lives. I mean, there is concerns with that backdoor oil deal that we've been hearing about. But aside from that, Rome did not fall because of external threat. It fell from within, and we see these problems from within, and that's what needs to be addressed.
Oh, good. You brought up Rome.
Rome.
So I don't like easy comparisons of America to Rome, but I do when given the opportunity to talk about Rome. So Rome, definitely the Republic. The Republic fell because of, and you'll hear not quite his, but his was the Syracuse one. No, I want to stay on Rome. I'm going to stay on Rome. Roman Republic fell because of money, because there was too much wealth in the hands of too few people. Really? And you can pretend and read anything you want about this way or that way, but it is clear as day. The Republic became a quasi-empire. So it was a republic, but it was no longer in Italy. It was global at the time. And the money that was pouring in that created these oligarchs like Pompey, like Crassus, like Caesar, like I could keep going. But that the inequality destabilized the entire civilization, and they tore it apart. You can go back in history and see this same story told over and over and over again. And that's why the people need to stand up. It's for our own benefit. It's how we keep this thing going.
History is prologue.
We're taking more of your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
202-808-9925. Taking more of your calls right after this.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from The Last Hours of Humanity, Warming the World to Extinction. This is from chapter 4. It's titled The Clathrate Gun. The deepest place on Earth, the deepest part of our oceans, is a massive canyon in the West Pacific called the Mariana Trench. More than 35,000 feet deep, the pressure of the water is 1,000 times that of the surface of the ocean. At that depth, a normal submarine would collapse like a paper bag. There's very little life there, and what does live is adapted to cold, pressure, and darkness like nowhere else on Earth.
The first man to dive solo to the bottom of the Mariana Trench was filmmaker James Cameron. A lay expert on the oceans, in part from his work making the movie Titanic, Cameron designed, funded, built, and in 2012 navigated his own submarine, the Deep Sea Challenger, into these icy depths. To say that James Cameron understands the ocean in a way that few other human beings ever could would be an understatement. From shallow dives to the deepest place on Earth, he knows the seas, and he knows about their methane cloth rates. As he told me earlier this year, quote, "The bottom line is that given the number of species expected to die off in the next century just due to climate change and the other effects of our industrial civilization, we are already in the middle of a mass extinction event equivalent to the lesser ones in paleo history, such as the KT extinction that took out the dinosaurs. Though the Homo sapien isn't a species that's currently endangered. However, the cloth rate gun scenario, James Cameron said, changes that. It doubles down on an already bad situation, putting us on the hit list as well. Not literally, because some people probably will survive in highly artificial environments, meaning the species will perish, but the vast majority of humanity will perish." Cameron added, with a metaphor worthy of his brilliant Avatar movies, "We're talking about the survival of our kids. We collectively are playing Russian roulette. We're putting a gun to their heads and going click, click, click. A cloth rate gun." Only discovered in the serious way in the 1960s, there is so much methane in the form of cloth rates, such as the frozen methane slurry on the floor of the continental shelves around the oceans of the world, that it's at least double all the known underground coal, oil, and gas on the entire planet. Peter Ward, the paleontologist at the University of Bristol, told me, quote, "Methane is way worse than carbon dioxide. It's inert right now in the soil. It's not affecting anyone in any way. When you warm it, though, it becomes a gas, and then it starts acting immediately as a greenhouse gas. So this is an immediate and very short-term threat to human civilization." For the last decade, a joint U.S.-Russia research team out of the International Arctic Research Center at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, has been exploring the East Siberian Sea. Arctic. They are looking at the bottom of the seafloor where once stable reserves of frozen methane have begun thawing and bubbling up into the atmosphere. Dr. Igor Semeletov told the research team in 2011. He told the British newspaper, The Independent, about what he found that year and the scope of the impending methane problem. Quote, "Earlier, we found torch-like structures like this, but they were only tens of meters in diameter. This is the first time that we found continuous, powerful, and impressive seeping structures more than 1,000 meters in diameter. It's amazing," end of quote. Amazing academically, that is. Horrifying for those of us who call planet Earth home. 1,000 meters is a kilometer, so this is one massive single methane leak, and it's a bit more than a half-mile in diameter. And it is just one of many. Dr. Smeletov added, quote, "I was most impressed by the sheer scale and high density of the plumes. Over a relatively small area, we found more than 100, but over a wider area, there should be thousands of them," end quote. Those sites would have been familiar during the Permian and other extinctions as well. As Paul Wignall explained to me, the significant thing about methane is it's a very effective greenhouse gas, so it causes global warming. Once you trigger warming, if you release methane, it's in positive feedback. It gets warmer and warmer as you release more methane into the atmosphere. So we think of this as a big part of the Permian extinction at that time. This is very rapid warming. Charles Dickens, who had proposed the methane link to the Permian mass extinction, told me, "We know that in the bottom of the seafloor, large parts of the ocean margins have methane in a solid phase. And what happens when you change the temperature, it can melt this frozen methane phase." He added, "The idea is that during some of these extinction events, we have some triggering that forces the ocean temperatures to warm, and then that melts the solid methane phase, which turns into gas and goes into the oceans and atmosphere." Paleontologist Michael Benton concluded, quote, "The risk is runaway greenhouse, which is when the self-correcting mechanisms cease to kick in, and you heat by a little bit and you release methane. That then causes excess heating and you release more methane, and so it goes on. It's believed at the end of the Permian 250 million years ago, this kind of runaway greenhouse gas exacerbated the effect, making it, the Permian mass extinction, an awful lot worse. By 2010, it was said that 8 million tons of methane emissions were being released into the atmosphere every year. But researchers believe that, too, is an underestimate.
More recent studies have shown a far more rapid increase in methane, CH4 concentration in the atmospheres. In the last 2 centuries, the amount of methane in the atmosphere has increased from 0.7 ppm to 1.7 ppm. That's the largest known increase in the history of the planet. The book, The Last Hours of Humanity.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom, and staying with me in studio, taking your calls, is my business partner at We Act Radio, Kamon Freeman.
Do something.
And yes, that is it. That's the official tagline.
That's official. What's the unofficial one?
How hard can it be? And Kamon and I set out to build an independent media platform and radio station and everything that we've built.
Best social justice radio station in Washington, D.C., 2017 by Washington City Paper.
And in 2010,
what did they know?
Our unofficial tagline was,
How hard can it be?
It turns out it's actually quite difficult. Quite difficult. Corporate media do not like to be challenged. I'm looking at my phone because I want to just mention this. I don't know if I'll read all of it, but the Intel Committee ranking member Adam Schiff put out this statement because the president, and the Darren actually was talking about this. The president threatened Comey, and he said, basically, you better not talk to the media or I might release tapes that I have of our conversation. He said that might or might not exist. And Schiff just released this. Today, the president made 2 extraordinary statements, one intended to threaten the FBI director he just fired in the middle of the Russia investigation and who may now be a witness, and the other to justify the misleading and conflicting explanation that he and his staff have given for that firing. If the president has tapes of his conversations with Director Comey, it is because the president himself made them. For a president who baselessly accused his predecessor of illegally wiretapping him, that Mr. Trump would suggest that he himself may have engaged in such conduct is staggering. And then it goes on, and he says, if they're there, he's demanding them.
Alex, this is chickens coming home to roost. The former FBI director, founding FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, did these exact same thing to other presidents and other officials, and now Trump is J. Edgar Hoover. All he needs is a blue dress, and he's flipping the script and doing it to them.
And he's doing it to them.
Yo, history is prologue.
What I've said is that, I don't actually care that James Comey was fired because he's been terrible. He's been terrible. I don't care that he's been fired. I care that he was fired to obstruct
That's
an
the
investigation,
issue that needs to,
right? That's the only issue.
Everything else is a distraction.
Let's go. Let's take some more callers. Jane, the attorney from Iowa, you're on the line with Kamon and I. Jane, are you there? I can't hear you, Jane.
Is there a lawyer in the house?
All right, I'm going to have to go to Dave in Washington State. You're on the line.
Yeah, hey, Alex. I've been hearing some things about Trump and General McMaster not getting along. And just let me comment on that real quick. I'm no fan of General McMaster. As a matter of fact, I was shocked when I found out he was appointed. But, and I heard a lot of this propaganda right at first about he doesn't suffer any fools, and I'm like, okay, well, they're just building him up a little bit. That's no big deal. But according to the, what they're reporting on like NPR and stuff, this stuff that's going on behind the scenes, like these rumors that Trump says, General McMaster is the one that's stopping his, his plans and stuff like this. And in these tweets, like to Comey or about Comey, that's Little League to a guy like General McMaster. General McMaster came up in the do more with less mentality. The main principle of war he was burdened with is economy of force. Okay, and he succeeded in that environment. General Mattis, by comparison, came up in the do more with more philosophy of war fighting. That's what all this Trump, all this Trump dressing people down and all that stuff's Little League to a guy like McMaster. It's Little League. Trump won't get by with it. And So I'm just wanted to say, I think their caller previously said something about General McMaster. I think there is a potential there for General McMaster if the friction is real.
And I've just reading same thing, same as you. I'm reading news reports that when it comes to foreign policy, they basically have built some sort of firewall so that Trump can't do what Trump does, which is why it's now all showing up in the domestic policy, which, I have no insight on that other than to say that Trump is an agent of chaos. Like, that seems to be his overriding business model, is just to get things moving, and then he's kind of like crosses his finger and hopes they work out, and it's just chaos all around him.
The cliche is that he's a bull in a china shop, but I don't want to insult the bull because I'm a Taurus and my birthday's tomorrow, so I don't want to insult the bulls by any way. But he's a train wreck, and a lot of us have been waiting for this type of train wreck to expose a lot of the corruption that already existed in this country. He did not create corruption; he is exposing it. And the devil wears Prada, and the emperor has no clothes. So here we are.
So at one point when they actually praised Kim Jong-un in North Korea, I just stated that I would no longer listen to a single thing that a Republican had to say, because they always had Dave, thank you for your call. Republicans generally always were like, they try to hold themselves aloof, like, oh, it's not about enriching the billionaire class. Like, we have this ideology of small government in the private sector, da-da-da-da. Trump has put the lie to all of that.
Absolutely.
Trump is the antithesis of this conservative worldview. And there you have Paul Ryan doing anything he can. Asked Paul, it took him 24 hours. He said nothing for 24 hours after the firing of Comey, and then he got right in line, right there, right behind Trump, supporting him the whole way, because there is no ideology.
I'm glad you pointed out the 24 hours.
They have no philosophy. All they believe in is looting the people and giving it to their criminal friends on Wall Street.
Timelines are most revealing, and the fact that they waited 24 hours lets you know exactly what type of conversation was going on in between those times.
And then the conclusion is to get behind them too.
Exactly.
24 hours. Dave, thank you for your call. I'm going to go to David in Connecticut. David, you're on the line.
Hey, Alex, am I on?
You are.
Hey, it's great to be on with you. I like Tom, but it really is nice to see other new faces on there. Makes the show great, and just to meet Camone today, I really enjoy that. I want to bring up a subject, Alex, that I think is very important. Nobody's talking about it. I want to talk about cross-check. And are you aware that yesterday Trump created a commission called Voter Integrity Commission, which he made Chris Kobach the commissioner of? And we all know that in the last election, Kobach scrubbed 1.1 million from the voter rolls, basically through the election, along with voter suppression. And we can have all the Russian interference we want, but these boys are going to steal the next election and the next election and the next election. And nobody's talking about this. And why aren't the Democrats on this? This is such a huge topic, Alex. And maybe you can give me some insight into this, because I'm trying to get my congressman to even breathe this, and he won't do it. But I'll get off and let you guys talk about it. This is a huge problem, Alex.
David, it is a huge problem. And, I was oblique about this before when I said he put in a voter suppression committee or commission or cabal. That's exactly what I meant. And when I said an overt nativist, I was talking about Chris Kobach, because I refuse to call this thing voter integrity, because it's the opposite, right? That's
the names they come up with.
It's 1984 doublespeak. Whatever it is they say, it's the opposite of that. This is a commission that is set up only to suppress the vote, and it's to suppress the vote along racial and ethnic lines, and to disregard that part of it as well.
Well, that's the whole point of gerrymandering to begin with.
So what about, do you know about cross-check and voter suppression and all of this? Like, how are we going to
all started with the dismantling of the Voter Rights Act under Obama's administration. So, I mean, there we have it. We're only having this conversation because they dismantled the Voter Rights Act. And everything else is just a product of that.
Well, operating in this environment, I do think Democrats need to take a lead of fighting back. Not just
progressive Democrats.
Not just rhetorically either, but actually so I don't like voter ID laws. Obviously, it's BS. Mm-hmm. But if they're in place, we need to start now at helping people get their IDs so that they can vote, as well as working to overturn these racist laws and dismantle these racist commissions. We should be looking at the enfranchisement of individuals as well. I talked yesterday about the philosophy that is should be undergirding all of our efforts that can tie it together. Everything needs to be in a majoritarian direction. More power to the people. Policies that do that, we should be on board with them. And then it can be multiple policies, right? So proportional electoral college. What I'm saying is when it comes to voter suppression, I don't think there is a silver bullet. I think we need to go after it in every way, shape, or form because...
As you say, everything in the toolbox and then throw the toolbox.
And then throw the toolbox, mm-hmm. Exactly. And then run after the toolbox and,
throw it again.
Throw it again. David, thank you so much for your call. And, again, call your members of Congress, 202-225-3121. Raise it now. It's important. It's going to be important in 18. It's going to be important in 20. In 2020 is the census, so it's critical that we actually raise these issues now. David, thank you for your call. We're going to be taking more of your calls right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Simone and I are going to be taking more of your calls, 202-808-9925, right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom. Tom is going to be back on Monday. We're going to take more of your calls. It's me and my business partner at We Act Radio.
Do something.
And we're going to go to Ayat in Ohio. You are on the line.
Good afternoon. I think I was absolutely right when he pointed out the corruption in the Republican Party. But we also have to acknowledge the corruption in the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how they did Bernie during the primaries was outrageous.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, corporations have taken over our political system. This needs to be made known. And, I mean, there is nobody working for the working family. No one out there standing up for us.
I mean, I agree with the fact that we definitely need to always hold our allies and so-called allies accountable as much as anybody. In the Democratic Party, we need to excise completely the Wall Street wing, the third way, the neoliberal cancer that is in the party that makes it beholden to Wall Street. And people have to recognize you can only be the party of the people or the party of Wall Street. You can't be the party of both of those. It's an either or. So we definitely have to ensure that the Democratic Party becomes the party of the people. But I quibble on the fact we do have some great champions. We really do have some great champions both on the Hill and outside who are fighting to increase the power of the people. And,
But there's an ocean of divide between the electorate and their donors. And we've seen that in even under Tom Perez's leadership, the fact that he was, chosen over Keith Ellison and when they actually recruited him to do this. But his so-called 50-state strategy was a farce because when we saw the special election in Kansas, they refused to sponsor that candidate who lost by single digits. And they did not contribute anything to his campaign when you had the vice president stumping for the Republican guy. So there we have it. So she raises a very good point, and we need to do more.
It's a great point, and we do need to do more. And I will say that, in Kansas, the people hammered the DNC. My take is that I don't trust any politicians, not a single one of them.
Not a single one.
Not a single one of them, because I've seen it. Just you
sound like my grandmother.
There are no permanent friends in this political game.
Mm-hmm.
They respond to people. And so it's the people who always have to lead. And I think the DNC did get hammered for Kansas, and now they are playing in all of these ones. And that's the strategy that has to, be had moving forward, not only to defeat the Trump agenda, but to build the world that we want to build, which I want to give you the last 30 seconds here to talk about what we're doing right now to build that world.
Well, we're building that world because climate change is very real. It was over 200,000 people in Washington, D.C., and no major media outlets was covering this. It was just PFW, WEAC Radio, and Thom Hartmann. So I want to shout that out. And over that, this weekend in Washington, D.C. is the Green Festivals weekend. So for those who are in town, D.C. Convention Center, greenfestival.org, coming to a city near you. But if you're in D.C., come out, test drive a Kia and other green initiatives and learn how we can have a sustainable environment and future for our children.
All weekend, Saturday and Sunday at the Convention Center.
Greenfestival.org. Check us out.
Timon Freeman, my business partner at WEAC Radio, thank you as always for joining us.
How hard could it be, Alex?
How hard can it be?
Well, it was a lot of fun.
On the Thom Hartmann Program, we're going to be taking more of your calls coming up. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and joining us by phone is Patrick Gavin with Talk Media News, and I will not be surprised by anything this week. I don't know what's been happening. I've turned off these televisions in here. So, Patrick, please tell us what's going on out there.
You mean you didn't hear that President Trump fired the head of the FBI?
We knew that one. We knew he then tweeted some threats at that guy at Comey. That seems to have happened as well today.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this has been kind of a 48-hour PR nightmare for President Trump. He this morning tweeted out that sort of threatening to make sure that James Comey had never recorded any private conversations that he'd had with Trump. And Comey, of course, saying that there was no reason for Trump to worry about that. I mean, this whole thing is just sort of playing out hour by hour and getting more bizarre and uglier and crazier as we think. And, our best evidence of that is that, there's a new poll out this week that ironically came out before all this happened, which means it's only going to get worse. But it put Trump's at a record negative 58% job approval rating, meaning 36 approve, 58 disapprove. And the fact that it came up before Comey's firing, so those numbers are going to go down a bit more. But that's just sort of the politics. Onto the kind of the policy side of this. I mean, there's a number of interesting things I think that we're going to take a look at in the days and weeks coming ahead. First of all, of course, is who might Trump propose to replace James Comey. You hear names from Kelly Ayotte, the former New Hampshire Republican senator, to Ray Kelly, to Mike Rogers, to Chuck Rosenberg, to Fran Townsend, to even Rudy Giuliani and Chris Christie, although I think that's probably safe to say a long shot. But, the fact of the matter is that, as we've learned in the reporting over the past 24 hours, is that Trump, of course, to the surprise of no one, really values loyalty. And so the idea that he would pick an FBI director that would be, kind of a free thinker and an independent-minded person is quite unlikely. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing I would sort of bring to your attention is obviously Democrats are talking a lot about having an independent investigation, either through the creation of an independent commission outside of Congress or a special congressional committee. I mean, both of these, while I think both logical and understandable that Democrats would request this, it might be wishful thinking that either one of these things will happen. I mean, for the most part, Mitch McConnell needs to give his blessing to this. And even in some situations, you actually even need the Trump administration's sign off on these things. And so this could be a real struggle, I think, for Democrats to actually get that done. But I think that just calling for it is such a kind of a no-brainer at this point that, at least politically speaking, it really makes sense for them to keep on hammering that note a little bit.
Patrick, has there been any new information on the way so basically he fired Comey, and then they said, oh, it's all about Hillary Clinton's email. Look, the Deputy Attorney General put this letter, and people were like, well, the timing makes no sense. That is a very ludicrous, excuse. Obviously, it's about the investigation. And then the retort was somewhat like, well, no one knows what's in his mind. And then the president went on with Lester Holt and gave an interview and said it's about the investigation. And that's what I was thinking about. Has there been any new, are people talking about that? Because that seems to be huge and verging on a televised admission of guilt for interfering with an investigation.
No, you're right. And the timeline is highly confusing and changing all the time. I mean, at first, the Trump administration, including Mike Pence, I believe, on Wednesday said that the decision to fire Comey came after the recommendation of the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General. Then Trump, of course, yesterday in his interview with Lester Holt says that, no, in fact, I decided a long time ago to let go of Comey, I think for reasons having to do with both this whole issue of loyalty versus honesty. And I think, too, I mean, this is why, by the way, I think this morning we saw in a bit of a tweet storm from Trump, him saying, why don't we do away with these daily press briefings? Because there's just no way that with an organization as large as mine that everyone's going to be on the same page. So maybe we'll just do things with written statements. I mean, he's reflecting a real thing, which is that between his own sort of differing answers and then his staff's differing answers and Mike Pence's differing answers and Sean Spicer and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I mean, the administration's not on the same page, and this issue has brought it to the forefront in the most meaningful way. It's one thing if people are talking about health care and one person says, well, it'll save 10 million and one person says 11 million and 12 million. I mean, this is of a totally different, significant level that, as you pointed out, goes to constitutionality and obstruction of justice. And you're right, the timeline does not add up. It's not getting any better. It almost gets even worse the more people ask about it. I think Sean Spicer is briefing the press right now. I'm sure that'll complicate things even further. So, yeah, this administration, at the very least, putting aside the actual things that they do, would be wise to kind of get all their ducks in a row.
If they get all their ducks in a row, Trump is just going to walk out and kick them over. I mean, that's what we've seen time and time again. That's my opinion on it. Patrick Gavin, Talk Media News, thank you so much for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program.
Thanks so much for having me.
And we're going to be taking a lot more of your calls coming up in this show. There's a lot to talk about, and we'll be taking your calls at 202-808-9925. I have Dr. America joining us in studio. And again, we're going to take as many of your calls as possible. Every time I say that, they look at me a little askew. But I'm going to try to get to all of them. So give us a call. I want to hear from you. 202-808-9925. I'm going to be joined by my great friend, Dr. America, in studio. And there's a lot more of listening to you coming right up.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
And welcome to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Crash of 2016. This is one of the very last chapters is titled Green Revolution. Just as America now faces an unsustainable thirst for energy, so too was Germany faced with a power crisis in the late 1990s. Growing demands for electricity collided with the reality that the country has no oil reserves and a strong bias among its people against building nuclear power plants in the wake of the nearby Chernobyl meltdown.
Yet the government knew that the country needed the electricity, equivalent of at least 1 or 2 new nuclear power plants over the next decade. So how to generate that much electricity without nuclear power? In 1999, progressives in Germany passed the 100,000 Roofs program, which mandated the banks had to provide low-interest 10-year loans to homeowners sufficient for them to put solar panels on their roofs. They then passed the Renewable Energy Law and integrated the 100,000 Roofs program into it in 2004. The Renewable Energy Law, REL, mandated that for the next 10 years, the power company had to buy power back from those homeowners at a level substantially above the going rate so that the homeowners' income from the solar panels would equal their loan payments on the panels and would also represent the actual cost to the power company to generate that amount of power by building a new nuclear power plant. At the end of the 10 years, the power company gets to buy solar power at its regular rate, and it now has a new source of power without having to pay and maintain and eventually dismantle a nuclear reactor. In fact, while the reactor would have a 20 to 30-year lifespan, the solar panels typically last 50 years. For the homeowners, it was a no-brainer. They were getting low-interest loans from banks for the solar panels, and the power companies were paying for the power generated from those panels at a higher rate, high enough to pay off the loans. It was like getting solar power panels for free. If anything, the government underestimated how rapidly Germans would embrace the program, and thus how quickly power would be produced by the program. By 2007, Germany accounted for about half the entire world's solar market. Just that one year, 2007, saw 1,300 megawatts, and a megawatt is 1,000,000 watts, 1,300 megawatts of solar generating capacity brought online just across Germany. For comparison, consider the average generating capacity of each of the last 5 nuclear power plants brought online in the United States. That capacity is 1,100 megawatts. So Germany had 1,300 megawatts just in 2007 added. In 2008, Germany added 2,000 megawatts of solar power to their grid, like 2 nukes. And in 2009, homeowners and businesses put onto their roofs enough solar panels to glean an additional 2,500 megawatts. Although the goal for the first decade of this century was to generate around 3,000 megawatts, eliminating the need to build 2 new nuclear power plants, the simple no-risk program had instead added over 8,000 megawatts of power, roughly 8 nuclear power plants. And because the generation sources were scattered across the country, there was no need to run new high-tension power lines from central generating stations, making it more efficient and less expensive. Meanwhile, as dozens of German companies got into the business of manufacturing and installing solar power systems, the cost dropped by more than half between 1997 and 2007 and continues to plummet. The Germans expect that by 2050, more than a quarter of all their electricity will come from solar. It's now just over 1%. Now, I wrote this book 2.5 years ago. Germany this summer produced 100% of their electricity this way. That's how rapidly this has changed just in the last 3 years. It's really remarkable. Adding to the roughly 12.5% of all German energy currently produced by renewable sources, mostly hydro, but also wind, biomass, and geothermal. The solar panel program has been so successful that the German government is now thinking that it's time to back off and leave this to the marketplace, which they've largely done. And it's not just leaving it to the marketplace. They had to reinvent their grid. There's to be a smart grid to handle all the added electricity that all these solar panels were producing. They have too much electricity now in Germany. Germany is now considering incentives to its world-famous domestic auto industry to manufacture flex-fuel plug-in hybrid automobiles that can get over 500 miles per gallon of strategic gasoline, boosted by domestically produced rooftop solar with existing technology. Meanwhile, Denmark has invested billions in having more than half of its entire auto fleet using only electricity by 2030. And China is no slouch when it comes to renewable energy. Although the Chinese continue to bring another dirty coal-fired power plant online about once a week, they surpassed every other nation in the world in 2010 in direct investment in the production of solar and wind power. As the Los Angeles Times reported in March of 2010, U.S. clean energy investments hit $18 billion last year. A report from the Pew Charitable Trust said a little more than half the Chinese total of $34 billion. 5 years ago, Chinese investments in clean energy totaled just $2.5 billion. The United States also slipped behind 10 other countries, including Canada and Mexico, in clean energy investments as a share of the national economy. The Pew report pointed to another factor constraining U.S. competitiveness, a lack of national mandates for renewable energy production or a surcharge on greenhouse gas emissions
that would make fossil fuels more expensive. The ultimate power to the people is for homes to have their own solar roofs, no longer needing power lines from distant power plants owned by big transnational corporations. And a few countries are pushing this solar tipping point, like China and Germany. Book, The Crash of 2016. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom, who is working on a documentary on climate change. This is my last hour here with you. I promise Tom is back on Monday. You're only stuck with me for one more hour. But give us a call, because I want to hear from you, as many of you as possible. And to help me with all of the calls and joining me in studio is my great friend, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram, also known as Dr. America, host of Dr. America on We Act Radio. Sanjeev, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me again.
And let's take some calls.
Let's do it.
We're going to go to Leonard in California. Leonard, you're on the line.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, I'd like to speak on racism. It was really created by the greedy. You know, how does the sun make somebody better than somebody else? It's all a scheme to make money. It's all racism does is glorify the white race. So therefore, the racists are kind of silly, aren't they? They're part of the 99%, and they're helping the 1/10 of 1%, so that we stay divided and we never get together and show our true power and really run the country like we want to if we ever got together. They don't like that. All they're doing is supporting the 1/10 of 1%, and they're part of that group of guys. They're dangerous to themselves and others, that's for sure. So therefore, they're really a danger to us. They're our true enemy. The true enemy of the working class is the greed of the oligarchs. They're doing everything. Everything is based on feelings. They want to get to people's feelings. That's why racism kind of exists a little bit, because they're trying to talk to people's feelings rather than their brain. We really got to start thinking a lot more clearly. Supporting the 1/10 of 1% is like supporting your neighborhood bully. You know, hey, you just took my lunch money. Oh, this is not working for any of us. I really think Donald Trump is only speaking to the 1/10 of 1%. He's making it great for them, but not for us, making life real miserable for the rest of us.
Leonard, thanks so much for your call. Sanjeev?
You know, when I was listening to him, it reminded me actually of a story that I've heard about Martin Luther King when he was in jail and how he would befriend the jailers, and when the jailers got to know him more and more, they actually found common cause with a lot of what Dr. King was marching for. And it was because of that human connection of describing that, look, we're not, this entire march, this entire movement is not just about ending racism in this country or fighting racism in this country. It's about fighting poverty in this country. And one of the things that he was able to really connect on is that, look, you and us on either side of these bars have a lot more in common than the people that we're fighting against out there. And, you know, I hope that when I'm out and you're out, that we can, work together. And it's a very interesting situation because you would hardly ever expect that, the two groups would ever find common ground, but they did. And I think that there is some truth to, what the caller is talking about, where, racism is a very effective, divide when you're trying to distract people from economic interests and other kinds of policy goals that would end up serving everyone, regardless of their race. And I do think that our opposition knows how to, I would say that they're just blowing a dog whistle, but they've gone way beyond that. They want everyone to hear it. It's
a bullhorn.
And I think that, they are really playing people to vulnerabilities that are not really American, are not really what people are truly worried about.
And it is it's not new. White supremacy is definitely a tool of control by the bosses, by the billionaire class, and it is based on the very old strategy of dividing and conquering. FDR talked about it, and he referenced that you go all the way back in ancient history, and you can read in Herodotus, the oldest trick of the tyrant is to divide those he's oppressing and aim them at each other.
Right.
So by dividing people up and saying, well, you're this type and you're that type and you're this type, and it can be done by race with white supremacy. They can try to divide people up by age and say, oh, well, the old people are taking or the young people are all lazy. And again, it's all to divide people up so that together, multi-generational, multiracial, multi-ethnic, through the power of solidarity, we're not going to be able to, they divide us up so we can't stand next to each other, point at Wall Street and be like, no, it's all them.
Right.
It's this very small group of people who have everything, and all of us standing together. And that's why they do it, because they're terrified of us.
Yeah. And we see this even in healthcare. I think it's one of the reasons why Medicaid becomes such an easy target for, the politicians of divide and conquer, is that they constantly want to try and tell the taxpayer, oh, these undeserving Americans are getting healthcare off of your tax money. And meantime, nobody is really pointing to the insurance company and telling them, you've been taking this workers' premiums month after month, year after year, and what exactly is this worker getting for it? When premiums go up by 20, 25%, there are very few people who can actually go to a clinic or hospital, find something and say like, oh, that right there, that's where my 20 to 25% went. They're going to see the same doctors. Maybe they're having this, a good experience with that doctor, but it's taking a bigger and bigger chunk out of their paycheck. And yet, you never hear the politician blame the insurance company for taking a bigger bite out of a hard-earned paycheck, but they love to point to the quote-unquote undeserving American for committing the crime of being on Medicaid and seeking the basic human right of health care. And I think it's speaking to that divide and conquer thing, when you realize that there are some real culprits here, but it's not the ones that we seem to keep blaming and attacking.
Right, and it is the culprits are usually the ones pointing the finger. The undeserving Americans are the Wall Street executives, the insurance executives, who add literally nothing. And we've had a bunch of great conversations this week about the transformation we want to see in the healthcare system, away from an industry to a caregiving model focused on wellness and not profits. But we had a caller earlier in the show who you would have really enjoyed. He called in to tell people about Medicaid and how important Medicaid is, and how too many people have it wrong, and it provides long-term care, and anybody might need long-term care at any time if they faced a life-changing accident. And I was like, yes,
absolutely. I mean, what the House just passed, last week, is what is the exact thing that you do if you want to fail spectacularly at the opioid crisis, if you want to fail spectacularly at Zika, if you want to fail seniors and people in long-term care facilities, then that is exactly the legislation that, if you want a failing grade, that's the legislation you pass.
And the House signed their names on it. We're going to hold them accountable.
That's right.
Let's take some more. Calls. Let's go to Joyce. Joyce in Montana, you're on the line. Joyce, are you there? Joyce, can you hear me? I'm sorry, Joyce, I can't hear you. So we're going to go to Barbara in Georgia. Barbara, you there?
Speakerphone, Alex.
There you are. Hey,
yes,
thanks for calling.
Here. And the reason I was calling in, because the real meaning of insurance, it seems like nobody really speaks of it, but my understanding, and you can set me right if I'm wrong, is to have the largest pool possible of people, so whatever the expense is for the other people, they're covered.
That is, Barbara, you're right. That is the way insurance models work, whether that is social insurance, whether that's private insurance. The idea being that when we're all in and we're all doing our little part, we all benefit. And I mean, insurance is supposed to be as simple as that. I prefer to, look at social insurance and that social contract that we have with each other, which speaks more to the values of the web of mutuality and how we're all kind of tied in together, because at some point we were all young. At some point, we're going to be old. We don't know who among us will, face a disability. And because each of us has those vulnerabilities in life, both predictable and unpredictable, we should be looking out for each other. And insurance is one model for doing it.
And social insurance is exactly so, spreading the risk. So Social Security is wage insurance.
Right.
And the idea is there are predictable loss of wages due to old age.
Right.
And then unpredictable loss of wages if a person becomes disabled or the breadwinner dies for the surviving dependents. And that by all of us together working on this in a social insurance model, we can actually provide something that's impossible for us to provide on our own or in a private on the private market. And it's the exact same, that concept of what we can do working together, sharing the risk. If you move to a healthcare system where you just excise completely and totally the undeserving Americans who are the insurance industry, and you base a system based on wellness, not on profits, what we would be doing is sharing the human risk. That is our lives. None of us know who will get sick, who will not get sick. But we together, if we're all together, and we are all in it together, we can actually face that down in a much more efficient and humane and rational model.
And and we can be healthier for it. That's the thing of it, is that, we can be much healthier for it under that model than we are now. The idea that, the thing about getting sick in America is that, most patients, when they hear that they have something like cancer, they hear a serious diagnosis like that, Yes, there is absolutely the concern about, are you going to get better, but are you going to get broke is usually the first questions on most Americans' mind, and that's un-American in my opinion.
It's just wrong. Sanjeev Sriram, a.k.a. Dr. America. We're taking more of your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Taking more of your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program at 202-808-9925 right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. Staying with us in studio, Dr. America. You can check out his show at weactradio.com. You can also find it on iTunes, and you can search for it on Facebook.
Right.
Dr. America, and Dr. Sanjeev Sriram is the mortal who morphs into Dr. America to fight for health justice for all of us. I recommend everyone check out his work and his writings, which you can also read his writings at the Huffington Post. Let's go to Norma in Alabama. Norma, you're on the line.
Hi, Alex. I had originally wanted to talk about Social Security, but since you have a doctor there, I want to ask him, how does he feel about having 2 outbreaks of live active TB in a state that did not take the Affordable Care Act to expand Medicaid? And we've had deaths last year from active TB. And this year we have another outbreak. Most people do not realize that we are not a static society. We move around. And if you think that someone doesn't deserve health care, but you're still going to allow that person to fix your food at the fast food joint or put your bowl of salad in front of you in a restaurant, how much of a risk does this put the population at? And aren't you thankful that it's just TB and not smallpox?
Yeah, I think that she's posing excellent questions and excellent scenarios that we have to consider as we look at what is broken in American healthcare. And she's absolutely right that when we are so hung up on this notion that my status depends on my having access to healthcare and you have to be beneath me, and being beneath me means you don't have access to healthcare. When we have more allegiance to that stratification of our society than we do to some basic principles of health justice, we can't be surprised when things like tuberculosis, which, that is a 19th century disease that we managed to kill in the 20th century. And here we are in the 21st century, and it's still a threat because we seem to care more about stratifying ourselves and each other than we do about just looking out for each other the way that we were talking about. One of the other things that the caller pointed out is that even if we were to get to a place where everybody has, affordable, accessible healthcare, we would still need the kind of workplace policies where you could take time out for yourself to recover from an illness, come back to work, and still have a job. And she's absolutely right about, the service industry, really exploiting people at times when they're sick, and the public health consequences are proven.
Right.
There were when the H1N1 flu epidemic hit a few years ago, there were over 1 million cases of flu that hit the United States simply because people were showing up to work sick because they were stuck in that false choice of, I can stay home and get better and lose my job, or I can keep my job but continue to get sick and feel worse because I'm not taking time out for myself. Again, these are not choices that, that I think decent people should be, should be facing with each other. And if we cared more about each other than stratifying each other, I think we wouldn't have to deal with it.
And not only that, but there is no way that billionaire on Wall Street, guess what? Unless he lives in a hermetically sealed bubble, the health of everyone is going to impact the health of that individual as well. We are literally in it all together. We're taking more of your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and staying with us in studio is Dr. America, who Sanjeev was just saying, somewhat apologizing for going on a rant, and I was like, have you literally ever listened to me on the radio? Because if your alter ego, is Dr. America, mine is like Ragey McRant's pants or something. When it is about justice, right. I get the feelings, and so I encourage more of that. Kate in California, you're on the air with Dr. America and me.
Hi, gentlemen. I'm recovering from chronic bronchitis, so bear with me. This relates to my question. 64 years ago, when I was born premature at 4 pounds, I was put in an incubator and released to parents who were chronic smokers and who smoked in the home and the car, which resulted in long-term asthma and bronchial issues my entire life. At what point do we not address that the society has a group of corporate, corrupt people who push poor food, smoking, all kinds of implications to our public health, and refuse to take responsibility, and it continues without the proper education. Now, the tobacco companies were slapped on the hand and all these funds were created, but it still doesn't address this drift towards corporations not taking any responsibility for the quality of the water and the air and what we've done to our environment, which affects us and our health. And this is something that is not addressed in the media at all, just like, climate change. So I'm wondering, what do we do as a society, and why do we blame people like myself? I'm 64 now. I'm blamed for something that happened to me. I had no responsibility. I was born into that environment. And I really appreciate the work that you all do there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Kate, what's interesting about the tobacco industry and how they the lessons that they learned and what they walked away from when they had to do like that multi-billion-dollar settlement is that I feel like a lot of corporate America looked at that and they didn't look at public health on one side having a triumph over this major cause of illness and death in America and say, you know what, we're going to take the side of public health on that one. We're going to, do right and be on the side of making people better and improving wellness across the board. They instead looked at big tobacco and thought to themselves, how do we not end up on that losing end of that settlement? And they kept looking at the wrong side of that situation when they had every opportunity and they had all the resources to come over to public health and ask and work with, public health professionals to say, what can we do better? And instead they wanted to, this is why things like, trying to get city councils to look at, okay, do we really need this much junk food and soda in vending machines in schools? The moment that comes up at a small city council meeting, you've got Big Soda right there lobbying against it.
Right.
And it's because they don't want to end up as the next big tobacco loser. And to me, what's devastating about this, everything that Kate was talking about, is that these are opportunities where we can talk about, public health, improved nutrition, creating the kinds of environments that make healthy choices easy choices. But that's not what our corporate friends are wanting to do whatsoever.
Dr. America is going to take more of your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I'll be with Dr. America taking more of your calls coming right up after this.
Thom Hartmann University Book Club reading today from Screwed, The Undeclared War Against the Middle Class and What We Can Do About It. This is from one of the last chapters, chapter 13. It's titled Setting the Rules of the Game, and the subchapter Gaming the System. If government can create conditions that cause a middle class to emerge,
by implementing fair rules for business, progressive taxation, free public education. The opposite is also true. Government can create a corporatocracy by deregulating business, by cutting taxes on extreme wealth, and by privatizing as much of the commons as possible. Conservatives call this starving the beast. Here's how you starve the beast. You put through tax cuts for the rich, which cuts back the revenues of the federal government to the point that if you got rid of all the social programs, you'd have a balanced budget. No more Social Security, no more spending for education, no more spending for Medicare and Medicaid. Let the government simply keep the armies, prisons, and police. Let's shrink government. That's their philosophy. When you cut all those social programs, you lose the middle class, and in its place create a very small wealthy elite and a large underclass of starvation wage workers. You lose democracy and instead create corporatocracy. You change the rules of the game. We the people lose and the feudal lords win. Cons have been winning this particular game of starve the beast since Reagan first started seriously playing it in 1981. They've done it in large part by lying to the American people. And they've had to do that because if they told the truth, the majority of Americans would throw them out of office. This is, after all, still a democracy. If the majority of us agree to get rid of Social Security so that only the wealthy can have retirement benefits and the old are left to fend for themselves, so be it. If a guy breaks his neck and can't work and the majority of us decide not to help people who are disabled, and as a result he has to beg on the street, well, we can democratically decide to screw him and ourselves. But the conservatives are not having this debate in an open and honest fashion. They're not asking we the people if we want to get rid of, for example, the Head Start program. They could ask, do we want to invest in our youth or not? We know that if we invest in educating the very young, fewer of them will become criminals. It will save us money over the long term. But the majority will say, of us say, no, we would rather pay $50,000 to imprison them later than pay $300 to put them in Head Start now. If we said that, then that's fine. It's a democracy. But that's not the way the cons are doing it. Instead of explaining why it would be better for Americans to give all their money to the corporate elite, they're giving huge tax cuts to the rich while pretending that the tax cuts benefit all Americans. Instead of arguing that Americans should not expect the right to health care or security in their own old age, they are promoting a government crisis by handing to the rich the money we're borrowing from China, Japan, and Korea in the name of our grandkids. They're borrowing so much money from these countries that if they so much as blink, our currency could crash. And that's just what the most ideological of the conservative elite want. They want an economic crisis because they figure that's the only way they can force a cut in spending on social programs. In 2004, they thought that they had starved the beast enough, and they sent Bush out on the campaign trail to advocate getting rid of Social Security, privatizing it, putting it in the hands of Wall Street. But it didn't work. Turns out we the people apparently like Social Security. So the cons went back to starving the beast. Bush instead passed a new series of tax cuts with more to follow. The cons are trying to play the game so that the rich benefit while the rest of us lose out. They get tax cuts, we get program cuts. That's not a free market. That's a market that's being created for the benefit of the rich at the expense of the middle class. The question Americans have faced since the first arguments between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton in the 1780s was whether the game of business should be played with the primary goal of enriching the few, or, while allowing the few to enrich themselves, enhancing the quality of the life of the many. The cons suggest that if the rich win first, benefits will trickle down to the rest of us. Protecting workers, they say, will produce abnormalities and dislocations from a so-called free market. For example, they suggest that when minimum wages are fixed by government and labor can lawfully bargain to increase wages by increasing scarcity of labor through union actions, the result is an increase in prices, ultimately hurting the working person. But the economists they often cite in this thinking, David Ricardo, disagreed that raising wages first increased prices. He noted, quote, on the contrary, a rise of wages from the circumstance of the laborer being more liberally rewarded or from a difficulty of procuring the necessities on which wages are expended does not, except in some instances, produce the effect of raising price, but has a great effect in lowering profits, end of quote. In other words, all that talk about keeping wages down to keep prices down is a smokescreen. Business owners want to keep wages down to keep profits up.
And when wages go down, profits do indeed go up. American wages have been falling steadily since Reagan first reintroduced conservative economics in 1980. And American corporations are generally more profitable than they've been in decades. In part, this is not only because wages are going down within the United States, but also because U.S.-level wages are being replaced by India and China-level wages through offshoring and outsourcing. But offshoring isn't a problem for American workers, the cons shout. It's the increase in productivity. American businesses need fewer workers because of automation. This is a tragic lie, and it's been bought hook, line, and sinker by most American politicians and even some economists. The book is Screwed.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights. You can support the Thom Hartmann Program and see video of our entire 3-hour show over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson filling in for Tom, down to my last half hour here with you all. So I'm going to try to take as many calls as possible. Joined in studio by Dr. America, who is going to take the calls with me. And we're going to go right to Penny in Kentucky. Penny, you're on the line.
Hi. I just wanted to make a quick comment regarding insurance. My husband is in a union, and in 2010, the membership voted to have 25 cents per hour taken out of their checks in order to have a separate fund for workers that were laid off to retain their insurance. And I just wanted to say that I'm so proud of our membership for voting this in so many years ago in order to keep the members that are unemployed covered with insurance. And I just get so discouraged that our society doesn't care about its people. And I just wanted to say that something really needs to be done, that we need to care about each other.
Penny, I think your story is so important, and thank you for sharing it. And that is solidarity. What that is solidarity. The workers are expressing solidarity in saying, you know what? If a worker loses their job, that doesn't mean that they should lose access to health care. And we all together, we don't know who might lose their jobs, but we're all going to pitch in through solidarity. And that's a incredibly powerful story. And I want to let you respond any way you want.
And I really hope Senator Mitch McConnell heard that story and gets to hear it, because, to me, I think that what's happening in Kentucky is happening in a lot of different parts of the country where, everyday Americans are trying to figure out, how do we look out for each other? And, it's hard when there are stagnant wages, when, you're looking at a whole lot of costs go up, like, how are you going to afford rent? How are you going to afford groceries? How are you going to afford your kids' tuition? Like, all these different costs are racking up. But yet here we are, like the American people still wanting to know, how can we look out for each other? And to me, I think it's that, like that unselfishness, that selflessness is really what guys like Mitch McConnell need to, tap into, and really need to make that like a cornerstone of American healthcare policy. And I really appreciate hearing that story, just because to me, it's proof positive that, there's nothing wrong in America that Americans can't, get together and fix. And we need our leadership to just, hear us out, because I think our decency is much stronger than our leadership.
And if they're not going to get to hear us out, we need to defeat them and replace them. Repeal and replace Mitch McConnell, for example. The story is very powerful and important, and it also makes me mad. It makes me mad at the same time, because why should losing your job mean you lose your health care? What a nonsense non-system we have right now. It's ridiculous, and we're the only ones who have this.
Right.
So, like, the idea that we can't do anything about it, we're the richest country in the world at the richest point in our history, and every other advanced economy has guaranteed health care as a right. We are the only ones.
Right. Yeah.
And, but we're leaving it up to the people to through solidarity. This is why we need to really show our leadership now.
Yeah.
While we oppose Trump care and the destruction of Medicaid and the raiding of Medicare, we also need to be fighting for what we want. Which is health care as a right for all Americans.
Absolutely.
Penny, thank you so much for calling. And, I hear when you say that it's disappointing and people not caring for each other, but I'll tell you, the people do care for each other, like you and the workers that you're talking about, and millions of Americans around this country. We really do take care of ourselves and care for each other. And there's the numbers, like when they look at who gives charitable giving, it's actually the low end of the income spectrum that gives the largest portion of their income in charitable donations. The people are fine.
Right.
The undeserving billionaires on the top, the parasitic middlemen in the insurance industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, they're not fine.
Yeah.
And if we can't convince them, we have to just defeat them and replace them.
And I think the piece of advice that actually connects, Kate from California and Penny from Kentucky is that, both of them are kind of asking like the thing of like, well, what do we do about all of this? And I think it's what we've been watching everyday Americans do, and that is to show up at every town hall meeting. Your city council has a chance for, citizens to comment. If, we've seen the FCC website crash because everyday Americans are, writing in. I think that, when you're, given the microphone, or even when you're not given the microphone, to show up and to speak out, because I think that, when those voices are being heard. And this vote on I can't really call it a healthcare bill. It's a wealthcare bill in the House. It was not an easy vote because people were nervous about going home to angry Americans. And my advice is to keep up that heat.
And they should be nervous. And, it took them 3 times. It took the easiest part of all of the process is getting it through the House.
Right.
They should have been able to get it through the House. They failed, and then they failed again, and then they finally got it by 1 vote.
Right.
And that is because of our voices. So we do have to just keep raising our voices. Town halls, phone calls, office visits, everything. Tony in New Jersey, you're on the line.
How you doing, Alex? Nice job filling in for Tom this week.
Thank you, Tony.
I wanted to say about single-payer Medicare for all, I believe that the American people need it explained to them in plain English why it is a viable alternative to the way we do things now. What will it cost? How will it be paid for? And I really do believe if the American people understood what it is about, how it would work, there would be a groundswell of support that I think would eventually carry the day, and it would become our country's policy. Maybe it's the Democratic Party, maybe it's just the progressive wing of the party, but it's got to be explained to everybody in a way they understand it, and they would say, we need to do away with this insurance company-driven, big pharma-driven system, and we need to go to single-payer for all so everyone is covered.
Yeah.
Great point, Tony.
And, Tony, I think that the last part you said is actually the great starting point for how to help average Americans understand what they have to gain from single payer. And what that is that if you're an average American getting your health insurance through your work, take a good look at, pay stubs over the last several years, and you're going to see that a bigger and bigger chunk of your paycheck has been going to an insurance company that is not doing its part to make you healthier and healthier. And instead, what you'll probably also see in those pay stubs is that Medicare has not been eating a bigger and bigger chunk out of your out of your paycheck, and it's been doing a fantastic job taking care of people. And so, like, when you look at who has been more responsible with, with like the average American's, dime and dollar, it's Medicare and Medicaid, hands down. Hands down, you want to talk about who has got like the best bang for the buck in American healthcare, you've got to be looking at Medicare, Medicaid, and to me, I think that once you you have to understand that first, that split where like who do you trust more with your dollar, the insurance companies or Medicare? And once you get past that, then you can really start to say, well, wouldn't it be great if all of us could have this?
And we often talk about expanding Medicare.
Yeah.
Because of that point, Tony. And I know not everyone really fully understands what Medicare is, but most people generally have a concept of it. And the people who are on Medicare love Medicare. And the people who are close to Medicare, have spent a lifetime already dealing with the bureaucratic nightmare that is the private insurance industry.
Right.
And they're just waiting, sometimes limping into getting their Medicare. And so we're talking about lowering the age that you can get Medicare and not stopping till we get down to zero, because it's a way for people to understand the concept. And at the root of it, though, if we can just let people know that, and I think part of the problem, Tony, is that it sounds like it's too good to be true.
Yeah.
But it's actually that what we have right now is so bad.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
Right.
So the truth is, what a Medicare for everybody system would be is everyone would be covered.
Right.
There's no like you're in, you're out. No, everyone, every single person is covered. They pay less and they get more.
Right.
That is what it is. It just removes the inefficiencies of the for-profit system. But Tony, you're exactly right. And I want to give you a little preview that Bernie Sanders is going to be releasing his Medicare for All bill soon, with the explicit goal of making this one a very comprehensive but understandable bill. And then he's going to really hit the road to explain the concept to people. So thank you so much for your call, Tony. I want to go to Ashley in Arizona. You are on the line.
Hi, Alex, Dr. America. It's great to talk to you guys. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thanks for calling, Ashley.
Perfect. Thanks so much. I just kind of wanted to go over this whole myth of the young American that somehow doesn't need health care. First of all, how do we stay healthy if we don't have health care? And, being a young, healthy woman, a lot of times with that comes, pregnancy and children. I'm sorry, are you there?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep. We're listening.
Yeah. So, along with that comes pregnancy and children. And, with that, maternity care, prenatal care, well baby visits. Somehow that young people or privileged people are somehow immune to tripping and falling and breaking their wrist. Or, any working mother can tell you that with daycare comes sick kids. You have to take them to the doctor. So just this myth of the young, healthy person who doesn't need health care. I think it just tells you that the conversation's being driven by people who just don't have a fundamental understanding of the just basic healthcare needs of the regular, everyday American family.
Or, Ashley, you might be being too generous, because I actually believe that they know exactly what the needs are and they don't care, because they know they can profit by denying care, that the money is in denying care. And so as long as they can create a broken system, that the brokenness of the system is the feature, not the bug.
Right.
Because that's where the cash flows from. The myth of the, invulnerable youth is a serious myth, so much so that we allow now, I don't think Trump Care took aim at this because it was so wildly popular. We allow children to be covered by their parents' insurance until 26, because around 18, you're seeing there's huge.
Yeah.
But I should let the pediatrician talk.
I mean, and I think that as a pediatrician, one of the biggest accomplishments that I've seen in my own career, is that when I was in training and when I was in med school, the number of childhood diagnoses where the end of the chapter is a tragic, sad story of like this young person is not going to make it past their teenage years and they won't live to be a young adult. Then you fast forward 10 years of medical science and advances, and these are patients who are making it into their young adult years. They're having families of their own. And this is opportunity for us to learn in terms of medical science, but it's also an opportunity for our society to have, young Americans with us who weren't going to be with us when, just a little while ago. And it's just nuts that that we would want to like turn our backs on that progress, and to have patients like mine, fight their way through cancer, fight their way to getting an organ transplant, and then it's going to be an insurance company that comes around and says, "Yeah, sorry about that." No, that is just not who we are.
And we only have a minute left here, but I worked to push for Obamacare, and because I knew that marginal improvements still mean real people's lives, and I worked in clinics, and so expanding Medicaid, but also because I saw, and I was there, I was a health educator, I saw the concept that a person's life could be not cost effective, right? That there's literally decisions that are made by a faceless bureaucrat in a suit, and you're like, why do you get a say in this? But there's a third party who can reach in and say, no, your life, because this doctor is saying you need this, and this, I'm saying, no, it's not cost effective. That whole concept is completely wrong. And we should never allow us to go anywhere near. We should not only not be going backwards, we have to be going forwards and get rid of the insurance companies totally.
Yeah.
We're going to be taking a few more of your calls with Dr. America on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin filling in, and we're going to be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Dr. America is staying with me in studio, coming up right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. Staying in studio with me is Dr. America, and I really want to get to all of the calls that I can. I'm going to go to Marguerite in New Hampshire. You are on air, Marguerite.
Hi, it's Margaret, not Marguerite.
Margaret, thanks for calling.
Okay, I have a question about a friend whose only source of income is disability insurance. Is it legal for them to take out her student loan repayment from that?
You're talking about a Social Security garnishment issue?
I guess so. She only gets about $600 a month to live on. And then 1 month she only got $25.
It is. So when it comes to disability insurance, it can be extremely complicated because there's multiple payers, like state systems, but what I can, just not knowing the specifics, generally there is one of the maddeningly gross things that can happen. So our Social Security benefits that we earn are inviolable. You can't sell them. You can't take a loan by them. No one can put a lien on them. Nobody can touch them, right? Because the whole purpose of Social Security is knowing that those benefits are going to be there. But the one person or actor who can actually garnish Social Security benefits is the federal government. And the federal government can do that for student loans. And it is absolutely reprehensible. It is indefensible and outrageous that this exists. And if that's the situation that your friend is in, I am sorry to say that is legal right now. We are working to reverse that. And there are some efforts in Congress underway. Ron Wyden, actually Senator Wyden, has put in a bill to end all garnishments totally, which is what it should be. So his bill, I think, is probably the best because it just sets in stone. No one can touch these benefits. And I don't know if you want to add anything.
I totally agree that, I mean, it's a moral atrocity. And it's the kind of thing that really shows you the distinction between what is legal and what is moral.
Yeah. And it's just I have more to say, obviously, because I work on this so closely, or maybe it's not obvious. So Social Security works. We have actually been with great allies at the forefront of this fight against garnishment for student debt and against all garnishment in general. And it's just this issue that we made some progress under the Obama administration, but there was a point when we could have, with basically the signature of a pen from Treasury, could have your friend's benefits would not have been garnished because it's a choice that's being made. Let me actually get to one more thing, Margaret. There are resources. So the ARC of the United States, my organization, Social Security Works. There are, and student debt crisis is another one. There are situations where your friend's benefits actually, there might be a program to get out from under garnishment. So I'd invite you to email the ARC of the United States, my organization, Social Security Works, and Student Debt Crisis to look at the specifics, because there are some cases that you can get out from under the student debt. Thank you so much for your call. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I've had such a wonderful week with you, and I know you're going to be very happy to have Thom back on Monday. So will I. So then I can listen to Thom. I want to let you in on a secret. This is an exhausting job. Thom is basically superhuman for being able to do this, but I know where he gets it from, because the way you get through it is you all. It's the listening to you all. When you call in, like I had callers call in and tell me about our book and how our book was really great and more people needed to know about Social Security. I'm like, yes! Another caller who's like, Medicaid is an incredibly important program. Yes! All of these stories of decency and just the power of people, the solidarity of workers taking a quarter out of their wages so that a worker who's laid off would have health benefits. These are the stories that invigorate me. They're the fuel that I can use to keep on fighting, keep on working to empower and enable you all to have your voices heard in this town. And I pledge to you to just keep on doing that. If you keep raising your voices, I'm going to keep doing everything I can to make sure that you're heard right here in Washington, D.C., because together we can take on the billionaire class and we can win. Our voices together can beat anything they throw at us. So thank you so much for allowing me to spend this week with you. I'm Alex Lawson signing off, and this is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.